2019, we had a total of 424 animals come in, and out of those, we had 238 in 2019, we had 317 so far, and out of those, 238 animals have stayed in our care. But annually, we normally see around 300 animals come in from the city of Lloydminster alone. So, and just diving into our associated expenses, obviously spay and neuter is one of our biggest ones. This can range from $90 to $250 depending on the animal. And then entry exams, which is vaccines, deworming, their general checkups. Treating illnesses, some examples are upper respiratory, kennel cough, ear mites, things like that. And then our veterinary appointments. So this is just when our in-house tech can't diagnose an animal, they have to send them in for that diagnosis. And also tests that need to be run on the animal as well. And again with food, just for allergies or clearing up those minor ailments. And operating costs such as utilities and shelter maintenance. And of course our largest costs are the veterinary medical bills and our wages. Cost control. So we, obviously again, to maintain the care of the animals in the shelter. So our managed admissions have helped with this so that we're not overcrowded. And we see less illness now, and they do get adopted quite quicker. And then again with the reduced staff, and we'll be asking more of our volunteers. So I will be introducing this into our volunteer orientation, and hopefully we will get a few volunteers throughout the week. And then again with the sustainable revenue generation from multiple sources, such as again as the kennel sponsorships and more fundraisers. And partnerships with our vet clinics, we plan to try and reduce these costs as well and come up with a new partnership. And then fee-for-service agreements with our surrounding communities. Again, getting all the communities on the same page with our fee-for-service per animal to help cover the cost of that animal coming in from their area. And again, with the gifts in kind, just getting our supplies donated, and we can issue tax receipts for those times. And then we just have a nice little graph here, just to show you how we compare. So this graph is a nice breakdown for the cost of per animal compared to other nonprofit shelters. So our costs continue to go down per animal, and then our animals again are spending less time in the shelter. And our managed admissions, we do believe, have helped with this, so we're not overcrowded. So we have started in 2016, we were at about $701. And we've cut it down to 577. So just just around 2 years, we've been able to cut about $100 per animal. And then just without this grant, we may have to cancel our spay and neuter program. So when I first started at the SPCA, we were only spaying and neutering our adult cats and dogs, and then the puppies and kittens, they would get refunded $100 of part of their adoption fee. So we were finding that this was rarely happening, so this is why we have started spaying and neutering everything that comes into our care, and the public also seems to respond very well to this because it means everything is included with that one-time fee. Another thing that we may see is a rise of unwanted litters in our community. For example, with the community cats and feral cats, which would be the main ones. And then the rise of behavior issues, cancer risks, such as these community feral cats interacting with our domestic pets and even sometimes humans. And then of the animals in our care may not receive the basic treatments that they need, which will result in our capacity to care to decrease. And then again, more time in our shelter, they will stay. And that's pretty much it. So thank you so much for your time and the opportunity to stand here in front of all of you today.
Thank you, Dr. You just stay there while we'll look around council and start to see if there's any questions or comments. Councilor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks for that. Just curious, I've been in this position before where you reduce a staff member, especially someone as seemingly important as an executive director to a position. Your budget speaks for itself as to where things are at.
Right.
Is it sustainable going forward to continue to have extra staff pick up that extra duty of an executive director? It puts more stress on everybody. How's everybody handling that? And because you're not budgeting to reintroduce that position at all.
Right. Currently, you know, like Zoe and I, we are trying to take on what we can, and then we are delegating to our other staff as well too that has that time. in future, I mean, hopefully that we can look at adding another upfront staff for sure too, for that extra help, I would say.
Yeah, I was curious on the long-range planning of it, because it's very difficult
Right.
to continue to offload your
Right.
responsibilities on extra staff. You know, so I was just curious what the
Yeah.
long-range planning was for that.
Yeah, and can I introduce Cam, our president, to explain it a little bit better than myself, or? Yeah. The budget's fairly new to myself, so I apologize.
Your worship of council. I'm Cam Anderson, I'm the president of the board. In regards to replacing the executive director, the board has stepped up greatly in filling some of those roles so that it's not falling back on the staff. We were waiting for one of our employees to return to fill that position, but she decided to take another position, so we'll be discussing that at our next board meeting to see what direction we're going to go and how we want to, if we want to do a full-time position, a contract position, or how we'll fill that role. That's for the executive director, so it doesn't fall onto our, overload our staff. We don't want them getting overwhelmed in positions that they're not accustomed to.
And if the board's taking a lot of that responsibility too, it makes it even more difficult for them, of course, as well. And even recruiting new and active board members when their responsibility is that much higher as well. So.
Yes, it's there's always that factor. People want to come on the board, but don't want to take on that extra role. We've been lucky. A lot of our board members they're more than willing to step up and go above and beyond to help keep the shelter viable.
Thank you, Cam. Councilor Torsten.
Thank you, Your Worship. One of the things you just mentioned was that the executive director position, you're going to be looking at filling some of those roles when someone stepped away. Are those figures included in this budget for the year for hiring that other staff member that's now walked away? I just want to make sure that you're not putting yourself into a scenario where partway through the year you're going to run into a cash flow issue where you cannot operate if it's not included in here.
Right. It was because we had a little girl that was away on maternity leave.
Oh, I see.
And she was planning on returning.
I understand.
She decided to take a smaller role just so she had more stable hours, so she'd be home with the new one.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. My other question I had was just, well, it's more a comment in terms of, you mentioned that you've been communicating with the other municipalities in terms of getting the agreements with them, seeing as in the past we've been more or less operating as a pound operation for them as well, but without necessarily the money following the activities that were going on. And you did mention County of Vermilion River and the RM of Britannia, but I don't know if you mentioned the RM as well. But is that one that you do have an agreement with as well?
Yeah, Wilton and Maidstone and Britannia and Cedar are our most updated ones.
Okay.
So we have a fee per animal, 125 for those animals. So I believe in 2015, I think all the contracts were renewed, but it's just a matter of us getting to each of those other 40-some communities to try and see it.
Right. So that's something that's going to continue to occur is because we are kind of the only, we'll say, pound type operation in the, kind of geographical region of, I don't know how many kilometers we're going to keep chasing, I guess, the other municipalities through the year to make sure that you have updated agreements and that the activities that are being performed by the Lloydminster and District SPCA is being funded appropriately by the municipality that is getting the service.
Right.
Perfect. Thank you.
Councilor Mitchell.
Just a question, I guess, as you pared back on staff, is there anything that's not getting done right now that should be and probably should be going forward in the next budget? I'm just sort of trying to get a sense of, is the ask the right amount? And I'm not here to say increase the amount, but I guess I'm just worried that, you have a couple of pressures. One being, fewer people doing more work, board members stepping up, and by the same token, we're still looking at, budget implications around this. So is there anything missing in this?
I would say that just for myself to be out fundraising more, like even just asking for those sponsorships and things like that. So I think it's really just a matter of us putting our jobs where they need to be in the shelter, plan them out properly, and so that I can spend my time doing that more so.
I mean, the sustainability question, in my mind, appears in a couple of different forms. One is the dollars and cents, but the other part is wearing out people that are volunteering. And at some point, people say, that's it, if this is what it takes to be a board member, I don't want to be part of it. So you have to try to strike the balance where, yes, you want to maximize people's engagement involved in doing things, but by the same token, is, the other side is when it's too much, then people walk away. And I think we've, as a city, relied a lot upon people volunteering, stepping forward, doing things on boards, and it's, I guess, in part for me is making sure we strike the right balance in all of this.
Right, yeah,
Yeah, I agree totally with what you're saying. We don't want to, we looked at some of the other shelters in the area to see how they're operating on a volunteer basis. And some of them are doing like almost 100% volunteer. One staff member, as a board, we said, no, we don't want to go to that because we have obligations to the city and the surrounding areas to provide the care that we do. And, if we find that, we're getting to the point where the board and the staff, the existing staff can't, then I guess we'll have to look at other means and start filling those positions again in the future budget.
The only other thing if I might guess, is that as we see the number of groups coming forward today and looking at fundraising activities, I guess I would encourage groups to look at maybe doing one large fundraiser, cooperating together and on some proportional way sharing funds. I just think that when we have 10 groups running around doing little projects, we kind of get ahead of each other and in the way of each other. And in the end, we're kind of feel like if you're buying a ticket or fundraising, it's like, what again? As opposed to maybe making a contribution once that's a little more significant. So you have company here today potentially that looks at fundraising as well. And, I think we have someone who does find, what is Samir's job at the city in terms of sponsorship? Yeah, sponsorship and those kind of things. You might be able to support some of that activity where it's more coordinated and one large fundraiser that would benefit multiple organizations. So just a thought.
We've been looking more of, still doing the fundraising, but we want to concentrate more on like sustainable income. Like instead of fundraising, Becca came up with a great idea of local business can sponsor an individual kennel, maybe a cat or a dog, and so that money goes directly to the care of that animal. So now we're not taking over a budget to care for that animal, and they get advertising out of it and so on. And we're looking at other means of those type of. So it's every month we have a check coming from a business instead of doing, like you say, little fundraising events that and essentially they get annoying after a while.
Well, on my desk I have a pile of tickets, and I call through it kind of each month as the draws expire, and I don't get a call for them. But whether it's Sobeys or I continue to buy them and support them, and I continue to donate. So I'm waiting to win. If you're selling it, it's a winning ticket. I'm all in on that one. But I'm just saying that based on my own experience when you see them, and so you have multiple people wanting to tap into it. So
I've got a couple questions myself. Going to your 2020 budget, I believe supplies for $17,000, food and supplies to operate. It didn't. I missed food for the animal food. Is that included?
Yeah, the food would be, majority is just the vet brand of food. So we get a large amount of donations for the generic food that we get to feed the animals. But yeah, there's just sometimes the gastro, the allergy foods that we have to buy from the vet clinics.
For professional fees for $35,000, is that you look at putting that out for bid annually? Is there some donation value also in that you're looking for professional fees for the organization? Because it is a fair chunk of money.
Right. And that, I believe, is our bookkeeper that we have on staff, or not on staff, but yeah, she's a third-party bookkeeper.
Their accounting fees with our auditor, so by hiring a contract bookkeeper who's very professional, knows what she's doing, we see hopefully for a large cut in that fee this year.
Excellent. Just moving to the general operations of the SPCA, how often has the facility been full this past year?
Has it been full?
Yeah.
Fairly consistently. Like I would say just we had our Clear Our Shelters event here in this past August, and we cleared out pretty good for that. I mean, other than the few that haven't been spayed and neutered yet, but other than that, it filled up pretty quick.
Do you keep track of the number of animals that are turned away?
That are turned away? we haven't. We do have a waiting list that we keep track of, and we will call those people if they're willing to hold on to the animals for us. So we do have a list of that.
One of the comments I hear from taxpayers is that they have to buy it at the SPCA and they've been turned away. And certainly that leaves them in a choice position. Your farm animal program still exists where you buy animals to the farming community without neutering and spading, I believe?
So we have our Barn Buddy program, but the Lloydminster Animal Hospital, they will sponsor 20 of those spay neuter surgeries. And once we hit that limit, then we just we have to go from there to see if they're a danger to adopt out, or if they're social enough that we can adopt out to our Barn Buddy program. Yeah.
I think if I could encourage you to reach out to the rurals from the municipality perspective, because I think from their perspective, they might find it interesting knowing that they can assist in that particular piece and provide to their taxpayers that are looking from that perspective. I believe that's the end of my questions. Anybody else have any? Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Your Worship. The question of regional service. We all know that we require this service, and it's a great service we provide. And sometimes under difficult circumstances, we know that. This is a question and a story all in one. We talked about Britannia and the county earlier discussion. I had a discussion this last May, the annual meeting of the RM Horsham Bay with the Mayor of Green River, County of RM pardon me. And I asked them about, because they referred to animal shelter, and I said, well, where's your animal shelter? Oh, we take it away. I said, well, what do you pay? How do you pay? Well, we take an animal, we pay for it. I said, don't you think you should be contributing something every year, because the asset has to be there whether you take an animal there or not. Mm-hmm. And I said, maybe you should take your animals to a different pound if you can't afford it. Mm-hmm. Because he was a relative of mine, by the way, and his name is Tom Brown. And that's a true name. And I said to him, I think you should think about that and step up to the table. But in seriousness, there's more RMs in counties or municipalities that may use this service than just the 2 or 3 that border us. And somehow with the help of someone, I mean, you're short of help now, or to write an appropriate letter to those municipalities and tell them that we're acting as a pound for everybody and we need your help. And we'll see how the elected officials in these other municipalities react.
Yeah, because I know that has been a conversation in even our previous board that we have, that we want to approach them with more help.
We're working on a plan very similar to what you're saying, essentially kind of a subscription fee to use the shelter, where they pay a yearly fee, flat rate of X amount, and then a fee per annum.
I haven't got a motion of council here, but I might suggest you talk to the city manager, and he might be able to direct you to somebody who can help you put together, a request from these other municipalities. And don't be afraid to go out. I can't speak for the western Anvil, out in the Anvil country, but I know over here, I know where they bring their animals. Right here. So just some information, nothing to do with this directly, but you should be prepared to do that if you can. Thank you.
Councilor Torsten.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick suggestion, the scenario that Councilor Baker was describing sounds awfully similar to our relationship with the Lloyd Rescue Squad, where I believe we paid them a flat rate and then fee for service afterwards. Does that sound correct?
It's a flat rate, no fee.
Flat rate, no fee for service afterwards? Never mind, it's different. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Becca, and Cam, thank you very much for your presentation. Moving on to 4.2, I would invite the Lloydminster and District Centennial Commemorative Association.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillors, it's good to be here on behalf of the Lloydminster and District Centennial Commemorative Association, otherwise known as the Lloydminster Regional Archives Association. That's our working title. It's much easier to handle. The presentation that I would make will be a very brief summary of the written submission that was made. And of course, as your reading skills and memory are good, you'll have noticed that it's only slightly adjusted from last year's presentation. The Lloydminster Regional Archives continues to grow and prosper over in the Cultural Center, Science and Cultural Center. And we enjoy ongoing support, not only from our board that engages in extensive fundraising every year, but also ongoing support from our many volunteers who really add quality to the services that we provide. The archives styles itself as our community's memory, and that memory grows year to year. We have well over 20,000 items in our catalog. We have over 20,000 photographs. Every year, our volunteers digitize a great deal more content so that it can be posted on our website and make our collection much, much more accessible. Accessible to students, accessible to the general community, accessible really to researchers anywhere in the world. We also, again, one of our volunteers, Ray Bailey, every couple of weeks updates our Facebook presence. And I must say, even though I will not claim any expertise in that field, the volume of traffic that comes to our archives and indirectly as a result to our community increases dramatically. In fact, Ray gave us some numbers at a management meeting last week, and we have 2,615 followers in Facebook terms, and when particular photographs are posted, I'm astounded at how they do get circulated. Even something as, passé as the old border markers, Councillor Baker will remember the old ones that were out there. 15,000 people shared that photograph. 25,000 people shared the photograph of the movement of the city's water tower to Kitscotty some years ago. And the most popular proved to be about 34,000 people who responded and shared a picture of the CKSA television tower having been vandalized some years ago. So it's a means that is drawing more people into awareness of our collection. And I think we need to acknowledge that. Our operations we're proposing won't change. This is a business as usual model. We're not anticipating any other adjustments at this time in this proposal. And as outlined in the request that we've made, we are reducing the amount of money that we're asking for by approximately $8,500 from last year. The reason for that is that although our expenses are relatively stable year to year, our revenue is not. Every third year approximately we get a license to be the volunteer group at a casino in Camrose, and that yields money that we spread out over 1 or 2 years. And 2020 is one of the best of the 3 years. And as a consequence, we have reduced our request for direct funds. Otherwise, Your Worship, I would be very pleased to answer any questions that council members may have.
Thank you very much, Don, for your presentation. I'll look to council for questions, comments.
I guess I was just wondering, Don, I know that some of the groups that have gone to cameras have talked about the amounts they're actually making now are a little bit less than what they had in the past, so whether that's been planned for in the budget.
The amount specifically from the casino, we've estimated relatively conservatively.
Okay.
It's in the low 20,000 range. I think it's fair to say that groups who have participated recently have found that the revenue has been relatively stable. No matter what happens to other elements of the economy, the gambling economy seems very resilient.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Barton.
Thank you, Worship. I'm sure it's just not listed here. You're going through and looking for grant opportunities and things like that. There was no grant listed for Saskatchewan lotteries or anything like that. Do you have someone that's looking for granting opportunities through these functions?
You're looking at them. We typically apply for Sask Lottery support through two different distributing agencies. One is the City of Lloydminster, and for the last 2 years, we missed the previous year, but the last 2 years, we've been fortunate to receive grants via the City of Sask Lottery's funds. The other major source that we have is the Saskatchewan Council for Archives and Archivists. And again, we've been very successful year after year in getting a grant through their good offices as well. Currently, we have 2 projects on the go funded through those sources. The project funds in total probably amount to about $11,000 for the current grant year, which is a March to April year. In fact, last week I met with some of our volunteers to put together the numbers for the next set of applications, and so they will be made in a timely way. I think it's important conceptually to distinguish between our standard operational funding, which keeps the doors open and our utilities paid and our staff costs, etc. Those base things are really what's included in the budget request here. Project funds have not been included, and the reason for that is that by and large, groups cannot use project funds for routine operational costs. And so all of the project funds must be expended for particular projects and accounted for in that context. So really, projects are independent of what we're here to discuss today.
It's a nice segue into my next question. How are your volunteers doing? How are the numbers? And I know that there are a lot of hours put in there on a volunteer basis.
Our volunteers remain very, very dedicated, and somehow each year they get smarter and more skilled in what they do. Having said that, they also get older. I've noticed that in some people. And the challenge to our organization, and I'm sure to many others, is to find that next generation of volunteers to step up to the plate. We certainly try to recruit, and we have occasional success, but it takes ongoing effort.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. I'm off to Camrose to our casino right now, in fact, to help our volunteers raise some more money.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Moving on to 4.3, I'll ask the Vic Juba Community Theater Board to come forward, please.
Morning, Your Worship, council members. My name is Kevin Kraft. I'm the general manager of the Vic Juba Community Theater, speaking on behalf of our board today. I can go through all of this if you'd like. I think maybe we've run over time with some of the other requesters, so I could just go to questions if you'd like.
Questions for Kevin? Councilor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I guess right off the bat, compared to last year, there's a $20,000 additional ask. Questioning what is the rationale or basis for the $20,000 increase in costs? Is there something different that you're doing this year?
There's nothing different we're doing this year. We're actually just anticipating having less success fundraising as we have in the past. It's a trend that we've been dealing with over the past 2 or 3 years. I think that as many nonprofits in the city are, it grows more difficult, especially everybody in town is looking for donors, and that pool is not growing. So I guess essentially we're looking to the city to help us make up that shortfall.
Okay.
Kevin, are you expecting more events this year, similar events?
At this point, we're tracking on exactly the same amount, give or take. It really varies because so many of our events are, I would say 90% of our events are not generated by us. Our McDonald's season consists of 6 to 10 event nights a year, and the remaining 180 to 190 are all outside rentals. So it literally depends on how many dance festivals come, how many times, how many Elvis tributes outside promoters want to bring to the theater. But we anticipate being as busy this year as we have in the past.
Okay, that leads into my next question. 6 to 10 events, is that the McDonald's series that is referred to?
Absolutely right.
That's sponsored through the Vic Juba directly, and everyone else basically uses the theater as a rental property. Is that-
That's exactly right.
Okay. Councilor
Just a quick question, I guess. That slide is interesting because it takes 17 years to raise 450,000. The math would suggest it's going to take a really long time to get to 3 million.
Actually, we're about 80% done with that.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a unique arrangement with the Juba Theater is the way it's set up because you're attached to the college on college property, and yet I think it actually belongs to the city, and you manage it. The stewardship takes part from the city, so it's just one of those unique pieces in terms of how it functions. And I guess, what's the expectation of the board for the city around this $3 million going forward?
I don't think we expect to ask the city for any of that.
Okay.
And I think that's been our modus operandi since we opened.
Mm-hmm.
I believe there was one capital ask for some sort of emergency repair back in 2004, 2005. But since then, we've fundraised nearly $500,000 to improve the city's building. And in this case, we're fundraising another $3 million to make a nice size addition to the city's property. And it's a massive understatement to say that it's an interesting rental situation or tenancy situation for us with Lakeland College as well.
Yeah, the part for me in the back of my head, I guess Kevin said, as I look at that and see that we now have another potentially 4,000 square feet and what the impact would be on the ask. If the number of presentations are going to continue on track about the same, your operating costs are going to get higher. So if the operating costs are going to get higher and your funding's going to stay about the same, you're going to come back here with a number that's going to grow each year as we expand the facility. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around, where we're at on growth, the property, and all those pieces that go in together.
Sure. We anticipate that the new rehearsal space is going to actually will be a money maker for us.
Okay.
It's something that we can use in concert, bad choice of words, at the same time as when the main room is being used.
Okay.
The secondary room could be used for smaller events. In fact, once that facility is up, is on the ground and open, it could add as many as 50 or 60 days to our calendar. That being, and I say that because where I might not bring an artist like Stephen Fearing or someone like that, like someone who's won Junos, but I can't sell enough seats to justify the entire theater. I can put 150 people comfortably into this new rehearsal space, and I can generate some income that way as well. And I mean, so can any community member or outside renter if they'd like as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just on the one slide, as far as community support, it mentions that in 2019, you're going to raise $45,000 from corporate and individual donors on the fundraising side. So in 2020 year, is that expected to be a lesser number?
We're projecting it to be a lesser number.
Okay.
It is difficult, if I can flesh that point out as well. When I'm sitting across from different business people, I'm looking for silent auction donations or just a straight up donorship. The question will come back to me a lot, what are you going to use this money for? Because most people like to donate to like a new bar for the concession or new furniture for the lobby. But when I have to give the answer, it's for operations. It's to pay my salary, it's to pay my staff salary and keep the lights on. There's often some confusion there because it's a city facility. I'm assuming that nobody from Service Sports Center is ever sitting across the table from somebody asking for a donation to keep that facility open. So it's more of a challenge because unlike my friends at the SPCA, we don't have cute puppies and doggies, and there's not a sort of a built-in need for my facility in the city. What the Victory Community Theater brings to the Lloydminster area, I think, is evident to anybody who's ever been there or heard stories about it anecdotally. But at the same time, it is a city facility, and oftentimes it's hard for us to make that case, or even make that make the building look like it's a city Lloydminster facility, even where it's sitting. So. And I guess sorry if I could go back. Sorry, go ahead, John.
No, it's fine. I was just going to stop you a little bit just to say that I don't think you have to sell me anyway on the value of having arts and culture type of entertainment as a form of recreation within the city. I think that as far as providing quality of life to people, you need to provide options that aren't only hockey. Not everyone plays hockey. Some people are interested in dance. Some people are interested in singing, musicals, plays, whatever. So, there is an inherent value there that I think you're, in a way, selling yourself short that does exist. My question, is just mainly around, if we could do it this year, you just don't believe that it's possible that it's going to drop off by $20,000 in the next year, which is just, I guess, surprising that you feel as though it's going to cut it half. So that's all.
I mean, we always have to budget for worst case scenarios.
Right.
And in our case, that's just the darkest, I shouldn't say the darkest, that's just the most conservative estimate that we can do with those numbers.
Fair enough. Thank you.
If I could go back to one other point that Michael made. We are on the verge of putting together a tri-party operating agreement between the city and the theater and Lakeland. Part of that for us is some sort of reinstatement of a $60,000 cash investment that was to be made by Lakeland College from the beginning of us locating there until this very day. We may or may not know that dried up after some Alberta provincial budget cuts a few years ago, and it's never come back. So I'm hoping that next year, I don't have to ask for it, I can come back with a $60,000 smaller ask because Lakeland has stepped up to where they're supposed to be.
Is that part of TIPS agreement? Is that what you're referring to?
It was part of the original TIPS agreement, yes.
So Kevin, looking at your financial statement or the expenses, one that jumps out at me is the credit card fees. I know you accept credit cards, needs, but is there, from a business perspective, has that been looked at to see if you can reduce that? I know that that's a negotiation, it's a business negotiation, just like anything else. I was wondering if you reviewed that from that perspective.
Absolutely, we have. In fact, we have had a fairly steady stream of bank and credit union employees on our board over the past, well, at least my 5 years there. And each one has thought we could come up with a better way. And we've always found ways to shape, a couple of small, the second digit behind a decimal point to get the better deal. So we're always looking for those things.
Excellent, yeah, because I would, you know, your expenses certainly are in line, I think, from everywhere else. And what just jumps out, it is a cost of doing business. But, yeah, it's just a challenge because it's max. How's Torsten, just
One more for me. Thank you, Your Worship. Just as far as, maybe this is an elephant in the room type of thing, but in the past year, you've gotten more competition within the city as far as a venue for entertainment. I'm just wondering, has there been an effect on your business model at all because of that?
No. To be honest with you, we welcome the addition of the casino as another player in town. I've always thought of, because of my hobbies and my interests and my friends, I've always thought of Lake Minster as a music city, or at least a place where performances happen. A second room, like the one at the casino, does nothing to hurt us. In fact, it just gives people one more reason to come to Lake Minster. So their ticketing is, their presentation style is quite different. I was actually in that room last week. Just to have a look around because I haven't been there before. For those of you who haven't been there, it's more like a high school gymnasium. Like it's a beautiful room, but it's not like a flat floor high school gymnasium with a small stage person. So you can certainly go there to see Big Sugar. I think this weekend or the weekend after. But when you really want to see them, you have to come to the theater to see them.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, the short answer is it has not affected our ticket sales or our business.
Thank you.
I'm just going to add that, in my former life, spending a lot of time, particularly around music and teaching and playing and all those other things, the value of the theater in the community, I think, is very, very critical in terms of the role it plays. And this past year, my wife and I attended the theater more than we ever had in any other single year combined, kind of thing, because of the quality of the acts that are being brought in the shows as well. So whatever you're doing, whoever else is doing and bringing the acts in, I think it's been really positive for the city to have that high level of entertainment being brought in here. So good on you and the people.
I'll pass that along to the team. Thank you very much.
any other questions, Ken? Thank you very much, Kevin. And thank you to the volunteers that make your operation run.
I will pass that along. We have an appreciation event for them on Thursday night. I'm sure they know.
Terrific.
Thanks.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 4.4, I ask the representative of the Grace United Church to call.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and council members. My name is Lana Lane, and I am a family support worker at Grace United Church currently right now, as well as a literacy consultant, independent, who travels the province doing workshops for children struggling in literacy departments. So I work lots with teachers. So I am here today to talk a little bit about the Grace United Play School that we have up and running right now. And hopefully you have the paperwork in front of you. I'm going to try and make sense of the document that I sent in to let you know what we're all about. Our organization is Grace United Church. We are an affirming congregation seeking worship and study work, actions, and fellowship to ensure a safe, nurturing environment. We include all people in the life and the ministry of the Grace family, persons of any age, color, ethnicity, gender identity, and sexual orientation. We celebrate the richness that diversity brings. So the program that we are hoping to get some funding for is, like I said, the Grace United Play School. So we're going to call it the GUC Play School. We are up and running right now. So we have dove in, and our plan is to run from September here till June of 2020. So it's a 34-week program running Monday through Friday, mornings only, for 3- and 4-year-old children. Currently, right now, we have 31 kids registered, 17 of those being little boys and 16 being girls, with representation from 5 different ethnic groups. So we have some families from Jamaica, the Philippines, India, and then the Indigenous and Caucasian communities as well. The detail of our program. Our mission of the Play School is to provide a safe and nurturing play-based environment, helping develop the social, emotional, physical, and cognitive, as well as spiritual needs of 3- and 4-year-old children. Our vision is that we are the compassionate faith community in Lloydminster. And I guess what I want to move forward with that is I want you to look at us as a nonprofit group, not as a church group, and these are kind of the reasons why. We are going to be doing, it's called the Fruits of the Spirit curriculum, with the themes based on love and joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. All attributes that we would like little people to achieve. Our families are to be networked with our community service providers through family workshops on literacy, healthy eating, technology and screen time, speech and language milestones, fine and gross motor milestones, as well as self-esteem, stress, yoga, and the daily routines. And there will be multiple opportunities for the intergenerational members to share their time, gifts, and talents with the children involved in our program. I guess when we look at our program, we know we've reached success, and this is what I'm here to talk to you today about, is if those 3- and 4-year-old children can spill out the values that I've just talked to you about, the love and the patience, the kindness, the joy, the goodness, the faithfulness, and the self-control. The program is open to all families. So it's not just people who go to church at Grace United Church. It is for all families of the community. There is a registration fee for families that can afford. So it is a $680 registration fee for families to come if you wish your child to attend half day throughout the week. We've recognized that some of the barriers for some families can be the financial cost, as well as transportation to get to our program. So what we're aiming to do is attract, hopefully, through granting and other programs that we've got going, that 1/3 of our population for our play school will be targeted for families that could not afford this luxury, so cannot send their kids to a preschool because of financial constraints or also because of the transportation issue. Like I said, we started already, so we dove in, and we've got 31 kids right now. And for those families, those are the families that have been able to afford the $680 fee. We've already secured a grant of $5,000 that will help us put 6 kids into the program that wouldn't have been able to be there. So we've networked with the community organization Midwest Family Connections, as well as the school divisions, and those are the agencies that are helping us target those families that wouldn't have that ability to do so. How our organization at Grace United Church is contributing to what we're trying to do. They provided us the space, so we do not have the rent that we would normally have if we had to go out on our own to some other building. So the church has provided the space for us, as well as hiring the teacher that we've got for our program, as well as the assistant. The babysitting for when we run our family workshops is provided by congregational members as well as our youth program group at the church. Monies, space, and equipment have all been donated for us. How is our need determined? As mentioned, I'm a literacy consultant traveling the province, and I work lots of hours with teachers and school divisions across the province, as well as locally here in Lloydminster, and my work at the church is family support. The outreach that's been needed at our church has been mind-boggling to me and actually overwhelming. And it's actually scaring me a little bit of how our kids are floundering a little bit in our community. So when we looked at the needs assessment that was actually provided by the city here in January of 2018, families not feeling connected, families that don't have loved ones here, they don't have family here, not feeling that they have a place to go, they're not sure of the resources in our community. They don't volunteer, and they don't really know what's going on. So looking at that, as well as my work and chat with teachers and divisions across the province, we know that we've got a huge number of little people that are struggling in the oral language, the communication pieces, the social development, the mental wellness, and the physical needs. And so Grace United has decided that based on the needs of the community and everything that we're seeing, there needs to be something else. And we've run into a little bit of a dilemma, I guess, when we talk, and Michael, you're going to know this as a superintendent once before. It's frustrating a little bit for me, who's been a teacher in divisions and now as a social worker, and having the conversations at the school level. We've got programs that are running in our schools. We've got pre-K programs, we've got identified programs for families at risk, and there's targeted groups that we're putting into those places. The pre-K program right now that's running in the schools is for families that can get there. It's free, right? If you're the first one to line up at the door, get your registration in, or be getting the paperwork done. The families that we should be targeting are maybe the ones that cannot do that, or aren't the first ones to get there to do that. So what we're trying to do with this play school is have 1/3 of our population be those families, the families that haven't had the opportunity to access those services. We know the research out there for 3 and 4-year-old children or preschool children. The earlier we can get the intervention in place, we know that we're going to have better functioning little people. And that's the goal of what's trying to be done here at Grace United. It's one of a kind because no other play school in the community is offering the family support stuff that we're doing. So when you come to us, you are expected as a member of the play school to attend the family workshops. And the family workshops being those targeted pieces that we talked about, where there are mental things that we're going to talk about. There's the emotional routines and the structures and the daily importance of doing those things. Healthy eating, what that looks like for breakfast, lunch, and supper. How do we do that as a family? Why is screen time and the lack thereof important, right? Why is oral conversation around the supper table important? Because those are the things that we need to be doing with younger people. So the expectation will be those families come to those workshops, and if you are one of the families that we've targeted, how much can you afford? Is it $100 that's going to let your child come into the program? Because these families do want to give back some way. Are you going to volunteer? So the expectation is you are giving back somehow, and we're going to teach you how to do that. So that is the piece I think that makes us uniquely different. I don't want to look at us as a church, but as a group of people, as a nonprofit organization that is trying to identify and search out the needs in our community and make a difference. Because not every child has that opportunity and is able to come to these paid type programs. So the budget stuff is easy for you to see. You have all that paperwork in front of you. Like I said, we're charging $680 for a family to come for 1/2 day so that you know what's happened now, because we are all inclusive and we are welcoming of everybody. I was at the play school this morning. Out of that 31 children that we have 5 kids that are nonverbal. 5 kids that cannot verbally tell us what their needs and wants are. 2 of those 5 live in Saskatchewan that we can probably access some funding for. All 5 should be in the daily program. They should be able to go to play school half day for the whole week. We've got them for half a day. Right, so we're not making the difference that we need to make unless we get some of those extra supports. And I have got the meetings scheduled for the school divisions to talk about these are the kids that should be going to a different program. But these are the barriers that we're going to come up against, but they're challenges that we want. And we're ready for it. So I guess I'll leave it at that, and if there are any questions for what we're trying to do here.
Thank you, Lana.
Yeah.
Questions? So, Lana, the one I had in my notes here, was there an actual business plan? I know you've done a budget, but a business plan, because I know there's other play schools in town, some aren't full, and I applaud you for starting, but there's others that are not, and it's challenging. But was there a business plan laid forward that could prepare this whole process?
Actually, I think where this all came from, Doodlebug's that was originally going on the highway here, so they're right across from Home Harbor in the old Interprovincial Survey building, that's what I remember it as. Lori had to shut her doors this year, actually, as the play school privately run, because the school divisions opened up their programs for 4-year-old children, free. And so a lot of those families took their kids to the free programming in Lloydminster and run as a private organization with 6 employees under her. She closed her doors. I heard that. I grabbed her and I said, hey, based on the work that we're doing at the church here, this is what we're noting with families. This is where I think our needs are. Would you be interested? And I guess, the luxury that we have at the church is that I can get the space in that big piece of it, no lease, right? No rent to pay, that we could go one day if we needed to. We could go 2 days. Let's go 4 if we can. And if we have to expand to the afternoons and do a morning and afternoon program, we have the ability to do that. I guess a big piece of what we're trying to do is educate, right? That there's a lot of stuff out there that people don't know, I guess, with families. For me, as a literacy worker and a support worker, the key is early intervention. And so we will have those conversations and with the community groups, school divisions, all that. Are we targeting who we need to be targeting here? I know Midwest Family Connections does a lot of programming, but it's not like a regular daily programming that kids would go to every day. So as far as business plan, we jumped in because we were able to, and we got a group of people that know this is a need, and we'll just move forward with it. And because we have that intergenerational piece and a lot of people that have some gifts and strengths and talents that they can offer to the program, we can get by with what we're doing. Because it's the first time up and running, you'll see the costs, right? Like equipment, supplies, we don't have any of that. We're all on loan right now. We're begging, borrowing, and stealing, and going to garage sales and doing whatever we need to do to make it work. But we got the people in place that can help with that, so, yeah.
Thank you for that answer. And
Yeah.
I think that, you hit a major one that you would run into is the rent, that you've got that covered thing.
Yeah,
Church
rent's big.
donation and
For sure.
activities. So I applaud you for being underway. Usually people come looking for money before they are underway, and
Yeah.
you've got to that point, so.
Well, I think the sustainable piece, right, is because we have the paid portion as well. It's going to be for what it needs to be. So for the families that can afford, we're always going to be there. If it's a one-day program, we can do that. It's a two-day program, we can do that. So there's a bit of a luxury there too. I guess as far as the families that maybe have issue with transportation and all that, we've made some huge network community connections. We've already talked to Lloydminster Connects, and we can have the van with car seats, right, that we can get people to and from if we need to, and that's only if we need to, right? So there is no reason for families not to be able to attend and come. We're going to get rid of all the barriers that way. So I guess for us, the first time granting and the request for this type of granting is because we are up and running as the first time. And I really wanted to make sure that it wasn't about us as a religious group and us coming out. It's really a nonprofit group, just seeing a need in the community and needing a chance, I guess, to just get started and get everything set up properly. Yeah.
Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, thanks a lot for this. I was just wondering if you have some of these students that are First Nations and basically have a diagnosis, have you looked at Jordan's principal funding?
Yeah, no, I haven't yet.
Okay.
So what's happened, Michael, because I didn't honestly, I knew we were going to get some issues,
Okay.
right? But the numbers is what's scaring me, right?
Okay.
So yeah, I'm definitely going to be looking at some different funding. I know we've got a couple Saskatchewan kids that I can get the CDS funding for.
Okay.
So I'm looking at all that. We talked to B. Fisher already, and we've got that in works. And also Sherry at Midwest Family Connections, we've done lots of
Okay.
conversations with, right? So now that we've got these kids identified, we will be looking.
Okay. Yeah, and Arlene would be a good contact. Arlene Urban, who used to be at Midwest.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome.
So you have a budget as well for 2020, and yet part of your budget that we see in front of us is 2019.
Well, we wanted to dive in, right? I mean, I'm not going to wait for budgeting. If we get support along the way, absolutely. And I think we've got a good core of people that are willing to help out in any way. That's why we just thought we needed to dive in. And again, that's related to the working families that I see at the church. We can't wait. You know, it is an early intervention. We need to go. So we just decided we're going to dive in. If any granting does come out of this, obviously we'll have those expenditures too after January. So it's always going to be there. There's always expenditures. Yeah.
Councilor Buckingham.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks, Alan.
Yeah.
Just wanted to, for my own clarity here, in the budgeting piece, the 30 students at 680, that's what you're charging people that can afford it to come in.
Right.
So also in the expenditure side of the budget, we've got 15 students at 680 for 10 too.
Yeah, those are the ones that I would consider subsidized, or ones that have come in. I just listed those as an expense that could be additional to, but that's not receiving the income for those, right?
Yeah, and
So-
that's a potential expense in your
Potential,
budget, not
totally
a hard
potential.
cost.
Absolutely, potential, yeah.
And that's what you guys are saying, that the 680 would cost the group to put them through.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I just think it's a little clarity.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Thanks for the question. Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Lana.
you.
Congratulations on kicking off and
Yeah.
getting started.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item number 4.5, I ask the International Festivals Lloydminster Society to come back, please.
Good afternoon, Mayor Hoppers. Good afternoon, council members. Thank you for the opportunity. I would have loved to jump straight into the video, which is really 1 minute and 31 seconds, and I would have had just about 3 minutes to present. But unfortunately, we can't upload that right now, so can I assume that you've all seen the video, courtesy Stingray Primetime News? Yes? Not very convincing, so.
Parts of it, not all of it.
My reason for that is that that video demonstrates very, very effectively a little bit of what Lloydfest was. And so certainly it was 1.5 minutes, and if that was already gone through on the process, then I would have just jumped straight into the success story. So, is it very difficult for everybody to kind of jump in and view it now, or not?
We don't have the ability.
You don't have the ability, okay.
So please go on with your presentation.
Yes, okay. All right, so the International Festivals Lloydminster Society is a non-profit organization that manages and oversees local and international multicultural festivals. In going through, I'll just go through some of the highlights as I indicated about some of these areas that I highlighted are ease of reference because of the time frame. So the vision to promote diversity in our community through multicultural festivals, to provide an annual event that will attract visitors nationally and internationally, to provide activities, events, and programs that showcase our community's talents and cultural heritage, bring ethno-cultural communities together to exchange our rich mosaic through music, food, dance, talent, craft, and art. What do we do? Lloydfest was a 2-day celebration of multiculturalism that was held at a picnic shelter at Bud Miller Park, and of course we're hoping to once again resume in that area for Lloydfest 2020. Moving along, the festival featured just about 11 or 12 different multicultural groups, and we're hoping to feature just about 23 moving forward. In the process of coordinating and networking, we are members of an affiliate of the Edmonton Africa Carnival. The festival has shown to be an intangible cultural heritage asset to Lloydminster that will showcase the uniqueness of the only border city in the country. So therefore, reaching out the arms of both sides of Saskatchewan and Alberta was quite effective. Also, as well as networking with MCOS, Multicultural Council of Saskatchewan. We all know that the festival kicked off with a parade, so we can move swiftly on with the effectiveness of it and get straight into a bit of the success story. Moving along to the headlines of the Lloydminster Source, I do have a picture of it here, so you will have it there. I just say that, you know, an encore presentation of Lloydfest is likely to be a no-brainer because of the enthusiasm and in the inaugural multicultural celebration. So, indeed, it was a very colorful success, as you can see some of the pictures there as we move quickly along through the photos. We do have a Facebook following page, just about 1,135 followers, and it has worked quite effectively in terms of always going there and making a visible presence and talking to people one-on-one. So we go through the flow of the colors and so on. I think you would have gone through most of it, and we are going to get straight into what I'd like to call the success story. So have we gone through all the photos? Yes. And so now just to also bring to your attention that the Alberta Milk did come and visit us. They found us through different sites, and they came and gave away over 1,200 boxes of samples of chocolate milk, and that was quite effective. And of course, we could just see some of the response there. To go straight into it, there were a handful of farmers that visited the booth, and we were moved to tears, expressing their gratitude to see Dairy Farmers of Canada, Alberta Milk supported the community. So that was one of the nice things that came out of that. As well as straight into the involvement of students into this whole festival, and you can see the boarding passes there, that face mask that you see there, and I've repeated it over and over, that this face mask will make from the students of the whole university, because I encourage students and so on to be involved, and I thought it was appropriate to use it on the boarding passes. So that one was randomly selected. I don't know who the trial was or anything like that, but just fit appropriately for promotions and advertising. So we look at some of the business people who are happy to join us, and we were excited to hear we move on to support from TVAC. And we're excited to hear that the event was a success, and looking forward to next year. And likewise, I do apologize for the error of the duplication for the response, which would have been referring to Roger Anderson from Gold Horse Casino, but I've been able to correct that, and I did bring with me the correct response from Roger Anderson, and it says, "Hi Susan, the Gold Horse Casino team trying to get involved in the community as much as possible. Our staff are very proud and to have been able to dance and have drummers at this event." And that was from Roger Anderson contributing to the parade. Likewise, Scotiabank, attesting to the fact that our team did a good job showcasing multicultural diversity, and they are looking forward to the event again. I would like now to get straight to some of the business, the benefits from the business community. And one of the things that we noticed is that initially I was trying to get about 4 different groups to come to Lloydminster, and one in particular, unfortunately not able to have the funding to help supplement some of the transport, no doubt. One of the groups came in and they worked with about 50 people. And I had to find 13 rooms to be able to accommodate them. And this is just an example of one group. Could you imagine if I was able to successfully get in those 4 groups from those 4 diverse cultures who could have come together? But some of us who actually live here, for instance, I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. I literally have 350 people from Toronto who play at Carrigan, and they moved from Toronto to Harry West and to Calgary, and they moved in droves. And they were coming here. And I said, 350 of you, where are we going to put you? But again, they were enthusiastic. This is what they do. They would like to come here, and the benefits would have all been to Lloydminster. So that is just one example. Moving forward, there are 2 other multicultural groups who are interested in opening up food businesses. And we all know the infamous strip chicken from Jamaica. A lot of people like it. It has a little spicy taste to it, and it works very well. And for this particular family, they are very happy. And they did indicate that, the Jamaican cuisine was well supported by the patrons, because on Saturday, we had to we were going to end at 8 o'clock. By 7 o'clock, food was done. That was it. They all sold out. And not just for Jamaica, for everybody else. So moving along, Pakistan did have contributions to say that the family and the Pakistan community had lots of fun and everything. And so Susan, lots more people would like to participate in the sale of food and cultural performances. So again, there's enthusiasm. So we're moving along. Nelson, a very, very intriguing story here. We have a stage now, which we call the Nelson stage, because just a couple of days before the event, we had no stage. We were not able to forward. These people got together and made us a fantastic stage. We labeled it the Nelson stage 24/16. It worked perfectly. Just again, a night of community spirit, coming together, negotiations, communications, whatever it took to put it together. So, the need. This is a very, very relevant and important part of all of this, because I'd just like you to cast your eye to this one under community need. And it says, there's usually nothing much to do during the summer, especially for new immigrants who are still trying to find a way. Maybe not for the season ones who know all about what's going on. And a recently conducted research by the City of Lloydminster and the local immigration partnership indicated the need of such festivals to combat mental health, depression, stress, and on the whole brings us together, making Lloydminster a welcoming community. The program is needed so that Lloydminster can promote diversity in our community through multicultural festival. Lloydfest is needed to bring ethno-cultural communities together, to exchange our rich mosaic through food, dance, style, craft, and art. And this festival will draw families together, not just to enjoy the display, but to learn from each other. I do have Mr. Kimo Mansuri sitting there with me of the program to do me to have or ask any questions further with regard to the survey and what that is all about. But I will say, just from personal experience. Seeing these different cultures come together, help each other with their tents, different language barriers, but I need this, do you have that? Can you help me? It was an amazing sight to see. Apart from it, I mean, I've been here, 7 years, and to see a bit of wine culture, up close and personal, the pride that it gave me and everything else was amazing. And so that's a kind of innate feeling that people get when you don't normally have them express to you just like that. So straight to the ask.
Susan,
Yes.
I believe your ask is what you presented, so thank you for your presentation. I will now turn it over to questions from council. There's no questions? Okay. Councillor Forson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Given that your group has 1 year under your belt as far as experience, I just have a question on the biggest line item as far as expenses go, and that's $30,000 for 7 months of salary to plan the event. I'm just wondering if things were learned in the first year that maybe you have enough context, things learned in the first year that would be maybe on the ballpark of excessive in terms of number of full-time months of work to get the program going.
You asked me if I think it's excessive?
Well, I'm wondering if there was enough learned in the first year, enough contacts made that we think maybe your $30,000 for 7 months full-time salary is high.
But I think if you want to look in terms of making it bigger and better, what you just saw was just a tip of the iceberg. And from the experience of knowing how these things can grow very rapidly and being in contact with other organizations and cities who've done this on a really, really big basis, it does take a lot of time, communication, and coordinating for it to be really spin off the way that it did. And so therefore, from the experience of doing it the first time and knowing that there was a huge amount of hours going into it, I would say, it's not going to at all given.
Just to be clear, I'm not trying to say that the event wasn't a huge success and that a fantastic job was not done. I'm not trying to imply that, so I don't want you to take that. The other question I had is just around the grants in general. So overall, the proportion of the revenues, quite a few are for grants that are not confirmed yet. Do you know when you're going to be getting word back on whether or not you're going to get the Canadian Heritage Grant or the Tourism Saskatchewan or Alberta Culture?
But all of the deadlines fall into around the same time. Like for instance, the city's not going to give an answer, I think somewhere around December. And likewise, so will the other grants, the timelines are more or less around the same between now and the end of the year. There are other grants that we would like to look at next year, and some of them are between February, March, and April. And so, but the bulk of it will be between now and December. And of course, to note, one of the key things for the federal funding is that they rely very heavily on a response from the city in terms of having that action approved and substantiated before we apply. I've already spoken to them and indicated that the response we will not get from the city until end of December, but they have access, like you indicated, that we've submitted.
Okay. So this is a theoretical question. If the city provided the funds asked and the other grants were not received, would the event still go on?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can tell you from the very first Whitefest 2019, the funding was so little that I'm amazed at miraculously how it turned out. So with that enthusiasm on what happened, there's no turning back to like this. Absolutely not.
Thank you.
But certainly, the prime beneficiaries are going to be those that are going to be on the front line with hotels and food industries.
Well, I haven't approached them in terms of sponsorship because the first time around I was pretty overwhelmed by the response of they actually wanted to come. But absolutely moving forward, there's going to be a lot of negotiations and discussions. And so, and bear in mind that you did mention the hotels and so on, but I tell you, there's a lot of creativity that goes into this.
Yeah.
And if apart from looking at people coming towards us, we have people right here in this community who can be creative to bring out their own product in terms of what can be portrayed in the parade. And this is what I would like to encourage. And therein lies another spin.
Okay.
Because if one community can say, okay, let's get together, there are 50 of us, and we want to clothe ourselves differently, create a different outfit, then that in itself spins the entire economic spin right here. And this is what I encourage us about. So that not just the hotels benefit, but everything that has to do with creativity.
Yeah.
Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Madam. Just a question. On the first one, Jonathan had you answer that one. The no admittance fee, everything's free. Nothing's free in life. And I'm just wondering, a nominal fee of $5 a head or something would cover quite a bit. If you're going to draw 2,500, 3,000 people, like free, I know you don't hear that anymore. It's free, somebody else is going to pay the bill. So tell me why there's no charge at all. I don't mean 20 bucks a head, but
I believe for the event have been successful as it was, with a lot of question marks on whether that I could pull this event off or not. Seeing that this event was free allowed people to really come and see without thinking, okay, I'm not sure what she's doing and now it's costing $5. There was a deliberate attempt to do so. And we are going to regroup as a committee and as an executive and decide, okay, do we really want to charge for this event? This is a non-profit. This is under the umbrella of a non-profit. Do we want to charge for this, or can we find other ways and means of making some money? Initially, we were looking at other avenues, but we can bring that to the bottom of the park. But however, we are going to tread very carefully. As a community event, do we really want to charge for this? We are going to look at the expenses and revisit it. And I agree with you. Nothing is for free. But having said that, people will be willing to contribute and do things in other areas. If only you can come for free. It's a play of the mind, simply. It's reverse psychology. I don't have to pay to come in, but I don't mind paying $15. It's probably $17, but it should be too. For me, it's probably $10, but I didn't have to pay to come in.
Yeah. My name is Kimo. I'm the local immigration partnership coordinator. It's a good question there. Why is it free? One of the goal of the festival is to encourage local people who want entrepreneurship. People who want to start up something that can actually turn up to a business in the long run. And in the beginning, if you ask them to pay, then that's a barrier already. So this festival is encouraging that. And the other aspect is to encourage our local artists who otherwise may not have the chance to showcase what talent they have. And in that process, that can be attractive. And in some cases, if they want to go, they have to pay money. But in this case, we're offering it for free so that they can come and other people who will be around will see those talents and may tap into that, and that can encourage. In terms of the hotel, in the first place, no, even this first festival, we had people coming from Edmonton and surrounding areas. It's actually boosts the hotel industry. Going 2020, we'll be looking into tapping into those sponsors to generate more fund for this festival. And in terms of your question, again, talking about the $30,000, yes, we reflecting on this year's festival. there was a lot of hours put into it, and we thought that probably it's kind of a full time within a particular period, so that 30,000 was to cover that amount of money so that we can have somebody to run an effective festival as we did and attract more people so that we can increase the numbers.
Any other questions? I guess the last question, or the question I have you communicated with the city both through FCSS and Recreation and Culture to ensure that if the city can be more involved, or you can be more involved with the city from an event like this, because I believe the city has looked at other events like this through, we have Heritage Day and other items. Has there been some contact with the city?
We have not yet, but the city through the SAS Lottery provided some amount of grant in the first place. But these are some of the discussion we'll be doing with Patrick through the FCSS to see how we can make this a signature festival in Lloydminster. One of the research that I recently concluded talks about depression, isolation, and mental health issues, and lack of festival for new immigrants coming. And the goal is to attract and retain people. And this festival is one way we can attract and retain them. Not only when they come and they see nothing is here for them, they will want to leave, but the festival has actually generated those kind of things that people, so definitely we'll be looking at talking with the FCSS and other programs that are around.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much for your presentation. Moving on to 4.6, which is the Lloydminster Area Brain Injury Society.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. My name is Michelle McGill, and I'm representing the Brain Injury Society here in town. In the early morning hour of August 12, 1997, Jeff, who was 18 years old at the time, was physically assaulted by another individual right here in Lloydminster. As a result of the assault, Jeff went into cardiac arrest. He was transported to the hospital where he was worked on frantically to regain breathing and pulse. This took upwards of 20 minutes, resulting in severe brain damage. Jeff was immediately transferred by air to the U of A hospital, where he remained in a coma for 3 weeks. Jeff gradually came out of that coma, but a lot of damage was done to his brain. He is unable to walk, talk, and eat orderly. Jeff, now 40 years old, is still totally dependent on others and resides at a long-term care facility for the past 22 years. It is because of the Lloydminster Area Brain Injury Society that Jeff, and along with other brain injury survivors, have an opportunity within their community to get the much-needed and deserved connections. The Lloydminster Area Brain Injury Society is a nonprofit organization which provides programs, resources, referrals, and respite for brain injured adults, their families and caregivers, and the general public. 32 years ago, 2 local women with brain injured loved ones saw a lack of resources in our city, and the society was formed. It is now our mission to empower brain injured individuals to embrace life once again and to become confident, contributing members of their community. An acquired brain injury, or ABI, is brain damage caused by events after birth. This type of damage can be from motor vehicle accidents, violence, stroke, a tumor, or even concussion. Just from that small list of different types of ABI, I think we can all agree we know of someone who sustained one type of these injuries. After a person suffers a brain injury, it often leads to emotional difficulties such as memory loss, anger management, and challenges with problem solving. These challenges can result in having social anxiety, loneliness, and lower levels of self-esteem, which lead to depression and isolation. Along with the emotional effects, the survivor will have physical difficulties as well. Such difficulties can affect their speech, their mobility or lack of mobility, their fine and gross motor coordination, headaches, or even sensitivity to light. LABUS has designed its programs to specifically address these common issues. Not only does our organization directly support those who have sustained a brain injury, but it also supports the families and caregivers by preventing caregiver burnout with the adequate time provided. Currently, there is nowhere specific for brain injured adults to live here in the city, so they end up in nursing homes, at their loved ones, or unfortunately out on the streets. LABUS provides a safe, stable environment for brain injured individuals to attend during the day. At present, LABUS offers 5 days of free programming called the Life Enrichment Program. In the past year, the organization has provided over 5,000 of free programming and respite time. The Life Enrichment Program is educational, recreational, and social. fellowship amongst peers leads into long-lasting friendships being built. Knowing you are not alone is extremely important to one's life after sustaining a brain injury. The overall aspect of the Life Enrichment Program is to connect the participants with their community, their peers, and themselves. During a typical day, the participants will discuss current events, keeping them connected to their community, interact and connect with other brain injury survivors, engage in interactive activities for socialization and physical skills. Take a task like playing a game that involves your memory, attention, and problem solving. Even as simple as remembering your turn with a strategy, the color of your game piece all come into play and help with cognitive abilities. It's important that survivors participate in outings and become involved in the community. This year they attended the Curtis Anderson Trail Ride and the Science Center in Edmonton. These outings encourage the individuals to socialize with members of the community, helping them reintegrate back into their society. People like to feel wanted, needed, and included, and these outings promote all of these. Our organization also offers a walking program at the Service Sports Center. This weekly outing not only provides the benefits of exercising, but also benefits the participants through socializing in a community setting, meeting friends and peers, and preventing isolation. Our society falls through many funding cracks and receives very limited grants and funds from the government. Brain injury falls into a small category as finding grants specific to this cause is difficult. Therefore, the society is responsible for fundraising over 50% of its total income. In 2011, the organization opened the Second Chance Clothing Store in the hopes of being an ongoing fundraiser, with funding continually coming in. However, unfortunately, we had to close down the clothing store due to the low economy and limited funds. New fundraisers had to be put in its place, and as you all know, it's been tough during this downturn with turnouts, donations, and proceeds. We are putting on more and more new fundraisers to help make up for the downfall, such as our state night fundraisers, slow pitch tournament, banana tournament, mock Christmas casinos, and online auctions, just to name a few. We are a small staff of just 3. We have 2 full-time and 1 part-time, and are responsible for providing all the programming, operations, and fundraising. It is important for our community to know that all funds received stay right here in our community, supporting those from within our community. We take pride in all of our services for free, as many of our participants are already on social assistance, and this additional service would not be feasible for them. I want to thank you for this time and opportunity. Any and all help towards our organization is greatly appreciated, whether this is through funding, volunteering, becoming a board member, donations, or help spread awareness. If someone here knows of someone, maybe a family member or friend that could benefit from our programming, we'd be more than happy to help out with any supports as well. So thank you, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you. Questions? In your budget presentation
Yes.
that was submitted earlier, you were showing an expenses of $175,800. Without the grant, you're basically on budget at the current projections.
Yes.
So what is the $40,000 request for?
So, we're asking mainly for just helping with our operating costs and trying to make a little bit of a profit. Unfortunately, these past few years, we've seen a negative in our budgets as we're just trying to sustain. So it'd be so nice, to eventually have a little bit of that surplus and start building up the savings, because ideally, I think we'd like to see our own space sometime. Right now, we currently rent, so it'd be nice to have a space to call our own.
Okay. Again, I think I read you're the only service within 100 miles.
Yes.
So,
In that sense, is actually, I don't know, maybe Saskatoon might be the next closest place that actually has a similar programming like ours, it's a drop-in center, but we'll take in anyone that is able to make themselves into our programming, so.
and from the perspective, the grant funding that you do receive, where does that come from? Is that provincial grant funding?
Yeah, right
federal
now
grant
we
funding?
see, the majority of ours comes from the Saskatchewan Health Government Fund, and we always can also get some from our Saskatchewan government and the community initiatives side. Those are kind of our 2 main grants that we receive.
Is there any support from Alberta?
Every 3 years we can get support from Alberta, and so it's kind of hard to sustain that same over those 3 years. So.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks, Michelle. I appreciated the story, as I've had almost since the entire time of Jeff's injury. I've had the pleasure of working with him on numerous different occasions, so I can relate to that. I just noticed in your presentation that he was talking about 15 people.
Mm-hmm.
That's the number that you currently have
Currently.
You're working with those people. It didn't say to me anywhere if 15 was the number that you are comfortable with, if you turned away 15 more because you don't have the funding. I was just curious on that.
We range about 15 to 20. We've never had over that, but that is also where we would max out, just as we only have one staffer for that runs our program. So that's kind of been our policies. We will just cap at 20, but we've never turned anyone away. So we've never come up against that.
Yes, you currently have 15 that are
Yeah.
accessing services of some sort on a regular basis.
Yeah, exactly. And some, I mean, that number kind of is an average, as some honestly have been coming for the past 32 years that we've been running, and some are that more drop-in, will come for a little bit and, gain the abilities and move on with their lives, which is fantastic too, so.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions? Councilor Forson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just on the side of, and it may have been in here and I missed it, but as far as the activities that go on in city facilities, does Lavis have to pay for those, or are they falling within one of our?
So like our walking program that we hold up at the Service Sports Center, I do get granting from SAS Waters to accommodate their fees. So their fees to go walking for the day. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Michelle.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
I would ask if council would entertain a motion for a quick recess, 5 minutes or so.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
I'll
Councilor Fang, all in favor? Recess for 5 minutes. Thank you.
and I'm here to talk about our Bridging the Gap project. And just for a little background, you'll be hearing the word turnaway probably quite a few times throughout this presentation. And I just wanted to explain that the word represents a woman or child who has been unable to seek shelter in our emergency shelter due to our lack of space to bring them in. And in fact, in 2018-19, we turned away 1,819 people from our shelter. In other words, that's 5 people per day. And depending on the month, and it averages out to be about between 80 to 90% of those people we're turning away are unique. So that means that it's not the same it's not the same person calling 5 times per day, it's multiple different people per day. And a little bit more context is the last increase in bed space that we had was in 1994. And data shows that the need has increased due to that, and that the City of Lloydminster has actually increased in size about 66% since that time, but our shelter hasn't increased. Phase 1 of the program, which we're not asking for funding for, but I think will provide you a little bit more context about Phase 2, which is what we are asking for funding for. Phase 1 is actually the capital development portion of the program. So our community need and the goal of the society is to build a new residential facility in the future, and we're still currently working on that. However, the board of directors and the leadership team has decided that we can no longer in good conscience continue to just say no or turn people away from the shelter. We're projected to be at a 20% increase of turnaways next year if our data continues flowing the same trends. So that will be over 2,000 people that we turn away next year. So we've decided that we have to do something in the immediate future. And that interim solution is to expand our existing shelter space into an additional 12 bed spaces. So for those of you that may have been at a tour in our emergency shelter, you know that it's an old fourplex building and that our administration offices are in the basement. So we've actually moved out of that space and we're turning the bedroom space that's left that used to be offices into new shelter space. Our shelter will, even within the addition of those 12 beds, our shelter will still remain undersized and at the end of its lifespan for its current use. But the short-term solution is immediate, simple, and fiscally responsible for the society and for the community. So that's the context of why we need funding for Phase 2, which is actually the operational plan to support the increased physical capacity of the shelter. So we need to ensure that women and children are not only safe, which is the physical capacity that we're creating, but still receiving the high level of care that our clients in the community has come to expect from the Lloydminster Interval Home. We need increased program resources to facilitate the increased organizational capacity. And increased support means increased personal stability, increased housing stability, and increased community stability. And that means less turnaways from our shelter. They will be receiving on-site and community-based support to help them transition from crisis to stability and out of homelessness. Increased capacity for us to provide targeted specific support to those fleeing violence and homelessness means less of a burden on other community resources who try to fill in the gaps when our capacity is overburdened. So our outcomes for Bridging the Gap programming is that this project intends to reduce the number of women and children in crisis due to fleeing violence and thus becoming at risk for homelessness. And so in the first year, we're going to decrease turnaways from our emergency shelter by 15% and ensure the transition to and the maintenance of stable housing through an increase in case management support. And I'll talk about some of the specifics on the next slide, which is in relation to the budget. So, of course, the biggest cost to this program has been the staffing, wages, and benefits. And we are going to up our operational team by 3 FTEs to increase or to maintain the level of support with the increased capacity. So the first level of support is crisis intervention support, where we work with women in shelter
to intervene in crisis and re-stabilize them while they're in shelter. And the next piece of that programming would be community connection. So connecting with needs-specific support, so i.e. addiction and mental health support, parenting support, criminal justice support, and housing support, which means helping them find homes and helping them stay in their homes. And then the third piece of this operational increase will be community-based support and transition. So working with women and children in their homes, so community-based support to ensure and help them integrate their life skills and further mental health support, parental support, and ongoing emotional support. And this ongoing longer-term support for them in their homes ensures the stability and reduces re-entry or recidivism into our shelter. And it further cements those community connections that we want to build throughout their transition from crisis to stability. And then the other pieces of the budget, of course, supervision of the program and transportation of $10,000. And the transportation is actually a big piece of our budget. We actually go to our clients and transport them to the different appointments they may have, different other needs that they have that they don't have transportation themselves, so we go to them and actually bring them back to our programming as well. Supplies is basic. Program supplies, utilities, and advertising is also included in that budget there. But of course, the biggest piece of that is the actual staffing to do the programming. So that was really the quick and high-level overview of what the phase 2 of the Bridging the Gap program aims to do. So I would be happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Thank you, Angela. I'll look to council for questions, comments. Angela, the number you've given, the 1,819 people turned away your commissions, do you have a breakdown on the provincial side? Is it similar to the populations of our city? Do you see that? Is that kind of the numbers? Or is that
So how does Lloydminster compare to other regions in the province?
Well, I guess that it's kind of a provincial, I know you do receive provincial funding. And from that perspective, is that what we kind of see as a breakdown provincially, and then I'm going to dig into it a little more, I guess.
Yeah, historically that has been the trend, but we're actually seeing in the last year to year and a half that Lloydminster continues to be higher than the rest of the province. We've always been on trend with, and that sounds so funny to say on trend, like it's something positive, but we've been identifying more closely with Edmonton and Calgary size of shelters for our turnaways. And that's been historical over the last 3 years. But what's happening is that we're one of the locations that are still seeing massive increases in turnaways. And I just actually had this conversation with our executive director of the Alberta Council of Women's Shelter, trying to figure out why that is. So Lloydminster, Edmonton, and Calgary. And I'm not sure what other rural shelters would be included in that trend, but we're still seeing inordinate increase in turnaways. So wondering, we don't have any quantitative data to say that, but qualitatively saying that it's likely due still to the depressed economy in oil and gas locations. So.
And then to go a little further, how big of area does the interval home serve? Because when someone's in the city, they consider themselves a resident. But how big of area do you serve?
Yeah, we actually serve 150 kilometer radius. The closest shelter to the east would be North Battleford. To the west, it is Sherwood Park. And then to kind of the south, it would be Camrose. And then to the north, it would be Meadow Lake. And then into the Alberta side, there's Bonnyville and Cold Lake, or St. Paul and Cold Lake. So yes, but our demographics typically break down about the majority of our people come from Lloydminster area, and that would be probably around the 80 to 85% come from Lloydminster and area. And we're actually just starting to kind of drill down a bit more into that data as far as what city and what towns around the area. We have it in our big system, but we need to find the right equation to get it out of the system.
Yeah, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That's always a challenge, and that's the privilege.
Yeah.
And the Achilles heel of being the city.
Yeah.
You tend to,
Absolutely.
that's where people are attracted to one way or another. So, other questions or comments? Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question. Within a 150-mile radius, is there any other how would I put it, interval style home operations?
So just again, the furthest one, the closest one west of us would be Sherwood Park. And the closest one east of us would be
You answered my
North
question.
Yeah, I knew what you were gonna ask, so I answered it early.
No, but I don't know, I mean,
Yeah, no,
smaller communities,
yeah, they come to us typically, so we see Vermillion, we see, out into the counties.
you know, I'm gonna ask you the next question.
Sure,
Are these communities contributing anything to the interval?
Yeah, to some degree. The county does contribute to our programming. The town of Vermillion does contribute to programming. And we receive some funds from the city of Lloydminster through SAS lotteries and other areas like that. But you know, there is work to kind of explore that and open up those channels of communication to explore that a little bit, absolutely.
Thank you.
Councilor Torson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to be clear, this Bridging the Gap, this is a specific program, the budget you have listed is a specific program, or is this the Integral Home as a whole's budget?
So this budget is specific to the increased programming that we are asking for to help off the increase in physical capacity. We need to accommodate with programming and operations. So this budget up here is just that increase.
Okay, because I was under the impression that it was quite a bit larger than the budget itself for
Yes.
everything. So
Yes.
I want to make sure I was clear
Yes,
on that.
you
So
got it.
thank you very much. Other than that, you know, as far as I can see, I think we have all the information, you know, that you could give us. It would be good to know whether there's any additional kind of SAS government type funding that could potentially come for this as well. But we all know how
Yeah.
this works. It's
Yeah.
very difficult to get funding from either party. So that's why I can understand the question coming from Councilor Baker and from the mayor as well, is when we get to a scenario where we could potentially be downloading what could be considered provincial costs onto ourselves as a municipality. In a way, it's important for us to know that everyone's on the same page in terms of the other municipalities that are benefiting from the service. But that doesn't mean that it's not a worthwhile activity just because we may be the only ones that are being asked. But at the same time, just knowing and understanding that, you know, when it comes to potential download on ourselves, that if we have as many partners in this, maybe it would probably be, you know, beneficial to all parties involved. Thank you.
I agree with you 100%, and those are some of the conversations we have been having over the past few years is how we do increase that ratio of other municipalities and locations helping to fund the operations, because we do support a portion of their membership or their community's members. And we do have our sights on engaging further with the Saskatchewan government, the Ministry of Justice. Actually, I think it's changed its name now, but them, as well as the RMs in the Saskatchewan side, and further with Alberta, our contract managers there as well.
I just want to find out a bit more, if there's, from a local fundraising campaign, are you looking at something as well? Is there going to be a cost to do the renovation plus the capital campaign as well as an operational campaign? Or have you looked at that as a potential?
Yeah, we have, so Bridging the Gap, this piece is just the phase 2 of our entire Bridging the Gap campaign, and that overall campaign is $415,000, which includes the renovations, includes the operation, 1 year of operations, and includes a van as well. So again, another piece of the puzzle to make sure that we're getting people to and from the programming. And we have been in the quiet phase of the fundraising campaign, and we're just in, we started doing our asks over the summer, but we know how summer is for getting anything to accomplish, so we're kind of just starting to gain momentum in that aspect as well. We have about 16% of our overall campaign fundraised so far.
Terrific. That's appreciated to say the summertime is not the easiest. You have fundraising.
Yeah, no, it's working's hard this summer.
Absolutely. Councilor Torson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry, that just raised a different question for me. So if this is an annual cost right here, and this is for the 2020 in terms of what's being asked of the city, I was just curious on what the timeline looks like as far as completions for renovations. Because if it's a 2020 ask and it doesn't get done until mid-July, then presumably the amount needed by the interval home would be, somewhere in the half region.
Yeah, that's a good question. We've actually already started renovations. So
Okay.
phase one has, I'm talking all these different phases, but the first phase of the renovation has been completed. So we've actually moved out of the shelter and moved into our new office space, which is actually the other end of the community youth center building. So we've occupied that vacant space. And we were waiting to proceed before hearing on a Alberta Rural Development Network grant, which we weren't successful at obtaining. That was a capital grant. And we were waiting to hear if we were successful because we couldn't start until October 1st. So we're actually planning to work right now with the contractor to begin the next phase of the renovations, which is the actual increase in bed space.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
And how are other interval homes surviving? Like, what are they doing? Because I mean, you said the stats are growing and on trend, Calgary, Edmonton, us, and so is there any sense at all that, legislators are thinking about adding funding to the pot, recognizing this, or what are some of the signals that you're getting from them?
The signals that we're getting right now is that everybody's waiting for the budget to come out.
Oh. Yeah, everybody's waiting.
Yeah, but I think it's the last increase in funding that we've had to the provincials, and of course I'm speaking Alberta.
Yes.
The last infusion we've had to the staffing model was in 2014. So it is on the radar, but everybody's been very hesitant for the last year and a half, knowing that the election was coming and now the budget hasn't been released. But I think what is really neat and and I'll toot our horn a little bit from the society perspective, is that a lot of other shelters in the province are implementing social enterprises. So Lloydminster Interval Home has had our social enterprise since 1992, which is for the Interval Store, which we've done a lot of work with and really trying to expand our capacity within that social enterprise. And we've been able to mentor Cold Lake and now Mountain Rose Shelter, and I've just lost what community they're in. So they've actually started, and Whitecourt. Those three, Whitecourt and Cold Lake, have implemented social enterprise, so secondhand stores, and are doing really well based on our model. And I've just had a meeting with Mountain Rose Shelter as well to implement. So a lot of shelters have always just historically done sheltering, which is, and really haven't expanded into programming. I mean, we've now brought on the youth center, so that's another way for us to not only integrate services but access different funding. But ultimately, the social enterprise is our biggest fundraiser, and a lot of shelters are starting to incorporate more social enterprise.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing the male suicide rate in that, in a particular age group is probably just right alongside of this as well. And I mean, there's mental health funding that's gone up to colleges, universities, and they're kind of on hold as well. But there's probably more coming from the federal government from the mental health perspective than the provincial ones at this point in time. So as we see that, I'm just wondering if there's a parallel initiative that's coming from the province and so on.
I'm not sure specifically in that area right now, but
Great, thank you very much, Angela.
thank you.
Moving on to presentation 4.8, the Lloydminster and Region Business Incubator Board. Start out Lloydminster.
Thank you, Your Worship, and if you could just hold on starting the clock for a second. On behalf of Startup Lloydminster and the small business community, we wanted to congratulate Councillor Baker on his recent provincial accolades. And we know that Councillor Baker has been doing some amazing work in the community for a number of years, both as a businessman and, of course, as many years of volunteer work and public service. So congratulations, that was well deserved. You're welcome. Well, thanks very much for having us here today. The Startup Lloydminster group is excited to be here and tell you about some advances that we're hoping to make as a response to a high need in the community. As you know, small businesses are the heartbeat of our community, and we have never, I think, seen that even more evidence than this afternoon when we're talking about the lack of contributors to fundraising and philanthropy, and we know that small businesses are often the first that are asked in our community, and they're always the first to respond. So this is something that I think is really near and dear to our hearts for those of us who are working in the not-for-profit industry in Lloydminster. So one of the things that we've worked very hard over the last 2 years is to ensure that we have the statistics and the measurements of our clients and the impact that we're having in Lloydminster, because a lot of the work that we do is based on grant applications, etc. So we did recently, within the last 30 days, do some surveying of our clients. We had a great response, 23% responded. And one of the questions that we asked was, okay, so we've worked with you over the last year. How many of you have actually taken your business, incorporated it, and are now serving the community of Lloydminster and the outside region? And over 43% of our Lloydminster clients have actually incorporated their business. And so we felt that was phenomenal results, especially as we see a number of our businesses in the community that are having a tough time staying in business. So one of the things that we also asked was, we gave them a nice ballpark figure if they were willing to share with us what their approximate gross revenue was. And a lot of these businesses are not actually just collecting dust, they're actually out there operating, and a number of them have actually exceeded to $200,000 plus revenues, which is significant. And these are all dollars that are coming back into our local community, coming back into our tax base, etc. One of the questions that we asked was, what is the most valuable service or tool that we provided? So many of them said that business planning and support. So if you talk to our local funding organizations, they can literally tell when a client has been through the startup program, because they come prepared. Their business plan is done, they have their statistics, they know what they're doing. So there's not that wait time of sending them back to start their business plan. 27% of them use the Business Model Canvas, which is a tremendous tool, and 24% of them activated our mentor network, which is comprised of a number of local business people, some of which are in the room today. And this is a volunteer program where we actually connect entrepreneurs with specialists in the community, people who have been there, done that, and they're able to steer them in the right direction. As well, they were looking for additional workshops and training and referrals for funding. So our case for support for this program, one of the things we've talked about today is mental health. We've talked about stress. We've talked about the economic downturn. And one of the things that really hits home to me is that our small business community is really ground zero in terms of the wellness of our community. We talked, Councillor Diachuk talked about the suicide rate of men across the country, but it's not just, of course, across the country. We're feeling it right here in Lloydminster. Every day that I look on social media, I see another business that's, probably going to close their doors, and this is really tough to watch, and I know that nobody feels it as much as probably the people in this room. But employers and employees have different stress than an entrepreneur, than a small business person. There is a heightened level of sensitivity to the economic downturn. Recently, BDC did a report called Going It Alone, which brought attention to the incredible importance of small businesses to the Canadian economy. So 97% of Canadian businesses comprised of small business. Their report highlighted the need for supports for local entrepreneurs who are at even a greater risk of poor mental health with the current economic situation. 46% of all entrepreneurs feel that their mental health affects their ability to function. And of the 4 major recommendations from this report, all of them include increasing supports at the local level through training, coaching, and creating support networks. We know that when people are supported, they are less likely to have mental health issues. Our entrepreneurs are under even more stress because of their ability to, their inability, to have peers that they can go and talk to. One of the things that we find at Startup Lloydminster is through our coaching program, through our mentoring program, we have entrepreneurs that are calling us. They just need to come in and they need to talk about where to go. They need to talk about how can they access additional funding, loans, HR training, all of those things. It's become very evident to us that business retention is a very, very important need in the border city. So Startup Lloydminster has, as we know, a good high success rate of helping people get their businesses started, and our statistics now dictate over 43% have incorporated their business. But what we need to make sure is that we get them past that next failure rate. So we know that a number of businesses don't make it past a year, and they don't make it past 2 years. And that's where we can really step up through the supports of this new program and ensure that our retention in the border city is solid, that we're making sure that these businesses have the support to stay in business. Since 2012, the Regional Business Accelerator changed to Startup Lloydminster, and we have been very successful in helping to grow local business. But one of the things that we know is that for whatever reason, businesses are still closing in Lloydminster. We know that through our new program, through Launch and Support, that we can help them to access questions about how to respond to bi-provincial issues, how to take the money that they have found, through their startup program and leverage it to provincial funding. We know that a number of the services that we're offering are in person, but we are also planning on expanding our online support platform. And also just that, we've created this ecosystem in Lloydminster. We've had huge past results. For years, Lloydminster has led in the national rankings of being one of the best places in Canada to start a business. And we have to make sure that we continue to be able to not just start businesses, but retain them. We're also a conduit to provincial and national funding sources. So every dollar that you invest through the City of Lloydminster is leveraged. It is leveraged to funding organizations, whether it be Alberta, Western Canadian, federal, but we are an entry point to a much broader spectrum of supports. Questions? Was I getting close to my 10 minutes?
You did pretty good.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Wendy. Certainly, Wendy, the one question I had was your survey, you gave percentages. Number of clients currently being served on a daily basis approximately by Startup Lloydminster.
So we track our statistics for our workshops, training, and for our coaching separately. So we're seeing several thousand attend our workshops and training. So we offer our lunch and learns as well as our different projected events. And we had locally over 99, I think over 100 clients respond right within the city that we're serving on a pretty much weekly basis.
Okay, great, thank you. One of the areas you talk about with this program, I believe, is a launch phase. Mm-hmm. We've got the Dream Forest.
Yeah.
So what is different from the Dream Forest to the launch phase, if you can use?
So as you know, the Startup Lloydminster will be moving out of the Community Services Building. Yeah, big surprise to all of you. But when we're moving, we've recently leased a space close to Community Futures. So there will be, in our project proposal, we talk a lot about the synergy that we'll have for our clients. And so this space, we're taking what we learned from the Dream Forest, we're recreating some of those advantages in the new space, but we're also creating some more private spacing as well with furniture and that sort of thing, so that entrepreneurs have a spot that they can come in and work and use as a launch space. So we're basically taking what we learned in the Dream Forest and being very cost effective, and our new space will be a very advantageous spot for entrepreneurs to come in, and they'll be able to work similar to what we've had in the past with our incubator space.
Okay. Will there be a cost for those individuals, some sort of cost recovery?
Yeah, and that's always a delicate issue, Mayor Albers, because since 2012, we've tried several models where we charge back to our clients. But yes, so that launch space there'll be a free period of time for, the space, and then there will be a time when we know that the businesses are starting to bring in some returns on their investment that we'll ask them to pay for some of the services that are being provided and for that space. So, one of the things about Startup Lloydminster is we're trying to seek that sweet spot, I guess, for an entrepreneur where we can provide them with some of the free programming, but then also provide them with some of those services that they're willing to pay for. And so the board at Startup Lloydminster actually did a revenue generation report last fall where they looked at many different ways that they might be able to become more sustainable, services that are lacking for the entrepreneurs in the community that they can actually potentially charge for. And so always looking to seek that balance. We do know, however, that some entrepreneurs, if there's a charge for certain things, that they tend not to be able to either, come up with that funding, or they're not willing to allocate that funding for whatever reason. So, we have to continue to work with them through that.
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. One of the stats you put in here is really intriguing to me. So being a small business owner can be very isolating without the services offered through the Launch and Support program. Stats show 80% will fail without coaching and mentorship. Can you unpack that a little for me? So I'm just trying to figure out, so is it the coaching and mentoring, or is it, the business model, or because if 80% of them don't get the coaching and mentoring, they're more likely to fail?
I think what we find is that, and through our coaching program, when we have a small business person come in, they are always surprised at the different conduits to their success. And so they never have all the tools in their toolbox, but when we are able to work with them to say, and without, giving any confidentiality, we recently worked with a local entrepreneur who has launched a national company, or she's now serving Western Canada with her product, and she was ready to close her doors. And we were able to work with her to find some financial support that got her through that hump. It was about a 6-week hump in her cash flow. And she got that past that, and now she's expanded. She's serving Western Canadians. And it's always surprising to me that, when an entrepreneur comes to us, they're so close to breaking through. And they've become so accustomed to the struggle that they don't realize how quickly or how easily it could be for them to gain those additional supports. So often it's through funding referrals, but sometimes it's just hooking somebody up with a mentor and letting them have a conversation with somebody who's been in their position, 10 years ago, and just says to them, if you just tweak this or this, you might be able to get through this. And that retention is so important because we are seeing such strong results on the incorporation piece that if we can just keep these businesses moving forward, that if they get past that failure rate, then that's where, Lloydminster sees that increased success that we can really support our community.
Yeah, I always felt that the banks provided some of that service, and so I'm not sure, and again, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're borrowing money and the bank will ask you to do a business plan, and so I'm involved in BDC in a project, and they asked me to lay everything out and where my money was coming, what the plan was going to be, and so I'm just sort of trying to wrap my head around that, right?
Yeah, it's really surprising, Michael. Sorry, Councillor.
Michael works, yeah.
A lot of our entrepreneurs have maxed out their ability to work with the banks.
Okay.
So the amount of funding that's required to start their business or because of the economic downturn,
Yeah.
they've extended any opportunities that the traditional banks are able to work with them. So that's where we're making recommendations and referrals to non-traditional sources. So that might be in some cases a grant. It might be our conduit through Alberta Innovates into the larger ecosystem for funding. It could be a referral to Community Futures or BDC. But we have a whole menu of a la carte options available to them. And recently, we've helped people get GoFundMe programs going and launch crowdfunding. So it's surprising if it was as easy as just going to their bank sometimes, but it's not.
Being an entrepreneur is not an easy, it's not an easy thing to do, and it's not for everybody either.
Yeah.
And gosh knows, there are a lot of people have big dreams but small plans.
That's right. Yeah.
Councilor Torson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for your presentation. It's great so far. My first question is just around this launch and support. So this is a new program, something that didn't exist in past years?
So this is really formalizing some services that we are offering, but not on a, I guess what I would say, an intended level. And so if we have an entrepreneur right now from the community that contacts us that we didn't help them necessarily start their business, we're going to have some supports available to them. But essentially what this is it's taking what we are doing and really taking it to the next level. So right now, our main business has been helping people start their business. That's not to say that we haven't helped entrepreneurs attain and grow, but we know that after doing some of our surveying, that's what our clients are now looking for.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure we're clear. So, if I was looking at our economic development plan, one of the problems being expansion and retention of existing businesses,
Yeah.
this is the kind of wheelhouse you're trying to fit into with this program.
That's exactly right. And, we paid close attention to your economic development plan and to that pillar. And we worked closely with economic development from the city of Lloydminster. And we know that for every business that opens, we've got another one closing. So we've got to keep these businesses open.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one other question I had just around the mental health side of things. So what do you see as being the role of startup as far as the mental health role from what at least I feel like I'm seeing in this presentation?
So one of the things that we're looking at right now is potentially how we can support entrepreneurs who are going through a number of different challenges. And so we're not, I guess you could say, we're not ignoring the fact that a lot of entrepreneurs that come through our doors are having mental health challenges, and how we would address that is through collaboration. And so through our small business network that we have in the community, through new projects that we'd be offering and leveraging those supports. So we recently received a $5,000 grant from Startup Canada to do design jam around risk analysis for small business people. And so we're always looking at those ways that we can leverage other dollars within the ecosystem to try to support the entrepreneurs, whether it's through their mental health, whether it's through human resources. And the last thing we want to do is duplicate services. We're not going to start offering mental health programming.
Well, and just so I'm clear, that's where kind of my concern was leading to, because within the city there's been
for sure
a lot of effort and money put towards mental health services, toolkits, navigating all those things that as a city I would have a difficult time supporting another program that was to go over and above what those other ones are already doing, but just for a specific area.
No, and so we're very, very well connected into that mental health navigation piece. Of course, our interim executive director, Glenys Reeves Gibbs, has been very involved in the mental health navigation piece. She's the volunteer chairperson, and as well, from my past experience at the Health Foundation, we would never want to duplicate services. But if we can find a niche where we can help our local business people access those services through our training and workshops, then that's what we would want.
Thank you.
You bet.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks, Benji, for being here today. There's a connection here somewhere between Community Futures and what you're doing.
Yes.
I just happen to be, one of my jobs is Community Futures work.
Yeah.
And on the Community Futures group, they do business plans, they do financials. Are you working really closely with them?
Yes, we are.
Because, as I can see it from where I sit, we've got people that are permanent in Woodminster. And we're all shooting for the same goal. You know, at the end, that's what retention is, like Councilor Jonathan said, and have people be successful what to do. And I just hope that you're getting the support from Community Futures. We have a federal government that spends a lot of money on Community Futures. And they're here to help, we know that. Have you heard that word before?
Oh, yes.
You heard that.
Yeah,
And,
you know,
so I hope you just, I'm not asking for an answer, I'm just
yeah.
hoping that you'll pursue that, and maybe you have, but keep pursuing that, because there are some people there that can write business plans and maybe be backup if you're going to use that, or help augment what you're doing. That's the only reason I'm bringing that up today.
And actually,
I'm sorry, and they have people that are fairly knowledgeable in finance.
yes.
You know, so
Yeah.
you
And
may look at that.
And Community Futures is one of our major partners, Alderman Baker, or Councillor Baker, and we work really, really closely, which is why we're actually moving next door to them. And so in our new space, we'll actually, yeah, that's where the new space is. So we'll even further create that synergy, but also preventing any duplication. So making sure that they're not doing business model canvases, and so are we, because we don't want to duplicate services. We don't want money from the federal government going to one organization and then your money going to another organization. We've been very, very cautious to build upon the services that are offered to our local entrepreneurs and not duplicate them.
You heard me ask that, use the word duplicate before, I know you have. And don't duplicate, because we can't afford three of everything.
No, and
Just make sure you buy a door.
Yeah.
And put it between those two units.
Well, we might have to bring you in as a
Maybe
consultant.
the doors.
Yeah, get your construction expertise.
It's cold when you go outside with a jacket.
Actually, there is a hallway between the two
Oh,
organizations.
still there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Wendy, for your presentation.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks.
Moving on to 4.9, the Lloydminster Social Action Coalition Society, better known as the Lloydminster Men's Shelter. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Council, thank you for having me.
If you want to just pull it down just a little bit. Okay. Terrific.
I feel like I want to hear a song when I have the mic in front of me. We have, for those of you who don't know about our organization, we're the umbrella organization that oversees the men's shelter in Gibbon House. The men's shelter is a 28-bed overnight emergency shelter for adult males, providing safety and support to those struggling through poverty and homelessness in our community. That in itself, the beds only are for men who stay at the shelter. Every other service we provide is to men, women, children, families, everyone in the community in need. So beyond the beds themselves, all services are provided to everyone in need. In partnership with local businesses, churches, volunteers, and community members, we work hard to meet the practical needs of the people who reach out to us for help. We provide on average over 100 meals a day to people who walk through our doors, men, women, and children, people who are going to school, going to work. The average length of stay in our shelter is 21 days. And we offer our lobby as a warming station in the winter and a cooling station during the summer, which it actually wasn't needed for it all this summer, so we could have just shut the light off in there. Those in need can receive food, clothing, toiletries, access to telephone, and other outreach support. We provide apartment starter kits consisting of bed, bath, and kitchen essentials for clients when they get on their feet, they get funding, employment, and they get a place of their own. During this past Prairie winter, we operated the shelter at or near capacity for longer than typical periods of time. And when it is cold winter, anything below -25, we keep our doors open around the clock because people can freeze to death in this climate. So we're very aware of that service that we're providing. We've had an increase in local and regional people coming to us for assistance, full families coming for meals. We're receiving more requests for food hampers to carry people through till payday. We've had an increase in requests for bag lunches for work and for school. And this year we're experiencing a substantial increase in the number of women coming to us for a safe place to spend time. So the word is out in the community that we're here to help and our door's always open. And everyone's welcome in our lobby. However, it lacks the space and the functionality to serve the quantity of people we are seeing daily. The next component to essential services in our community, we're excited to announce that we're opening a community drop-in center. We expect to have it up and running by the end of October. We appreciate St. John's Anglican Church for offering us the space. And it's well situated and a functional space. It's featuring separate ladies and men's washroom, a kitchen, large common spaces, and offices for private outreach and counseling meetings. This drop-in center will keep marginalized people off the streets during the harsh winter. It's more suitable than having people, out of necessity, loitering in Lloyd Mall, Public Library, Prairie North Clinic, and other businesses where they may affect the experience of other patrons at these locations. We've received letters of endorsement for our drop-in center from our local businesses and community services sectors. On our to-do list, we are now advertising to hire a social worker who's going to oversee the drop-in center. They're going to supervise the many volunteers who will be providing practical help. They will also be overseeing the many practicum students that we are lucky enough to receive support from our local Lakeland College faculties. We're going to meet with community groups this week, actually, who have expressed interest in helping. So some of that might look like a local church organization might want to sponsor a day a week. So they may say, we'll take Wednesday, we'll bring the volunteers, and we'll bring the pots of soup, and we'll be there as practical support for the professional staff on duty. And we're really excited about having these organizations coming to us and saying, we want it. So it's really a community drop-in center by every true sense of the word. Right now we're looking at cleaning, painting, polishing, all of those things, planning menus and activities. We intend to offer life skills classes, all of the things that make a warm, welcoming place for people to spend the days when otherwise they might be outside in the cold. Our startup budget, it's pretty standard. All the things that we're going to need to operate a kitchen, consumables and so on. And our annual budget will include the social work professional and, again, the consumables. I'd like to thank you for your time and ask any questions you'd like to ask.
Thank you for your presentation, Howard. Questions, comments?
I just have a quick question. I met with an individual who works with individuals who are often coming to your door, and one of the pieces that I did hear through the conversation was that there were a lot of new faces that were homeless in the city. Would that be accurate?
Yes, it is accurate.
And where are they from? What's happening? Age? All the rest of that?
They're coming from across Canada for sure. We see people coming from the east coast to the west coast. I think they're just looking for warmer year-round places to live. So they're stopping at different shelters across the country for respite. There's also an increase in the number of people in our own region and in our own province. We're seeing people from outlying areas who are coming to Lloydminster to access our services much more regularly.
Thanks.
Well, you talked about food bank or donations and hampers. You have a working relationship with, there's a few organizations I'm familiar with in the community. So how does that work with your organization as well?
Well, we do have a lot of fantastic organizations in our community that provide similar services. However, we all seem to have, we share some clients, but we all have distinction in our mandates and what we offer in the community. So although we do partner in some ways, we're also unique individual organizations.
Now, is there a soup kitchen currently being run, if I can use that term, over the Anglican Church Hall 3 days a week?
2 days a week,
2 days a
and
week.
that will continue to run. So on the 2 days that there's a soup kitchen in the Anglican Church, we will not provide lunch service upstairs in the drop-in center.
Okay, so would you be, okay, so you were operating 5 days a week, but it'd be basically the other services of having a place where people will be warm, is that what would happen those 2 days?
We will not compete with them during those times for their client service. So they will, on those days, go down into the soup kitchen to have their lunch.
Yeah.
But we will still be open. Our social worker will be there. Our community support volunteers will be there. So we will still function in all their other aspects of that.
Okay, and that would give someone a place to use the washroom. And
Absolutely.
find drinking water, because having, a chat with people that are homeless, that's two of the challenges that most people find, is they can't find a place to get a clean drink of water and a place to use a washroom. So I think
That's absolutely right. And that was the first thing that we looked at when we saw that space, is that it had a separate men's and ladies washroom that was appropriate and accommodable. Now, when we look at 5 days a week, really that's just a benchmark for a startup. Over the winter, we'll be operating that way. And then as we determine the need and what hours we would best be serving our clients, we'll modify within the next year as we see from quarter to quarter what our services look like and how we're able to support our clients. So it's just, we'll finesse as we go.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Thank you very much, Valerie, for your presentation. Uh, 4.10 is residents in recovery.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, council members and staff.
Good afternoon, Tyler.
My name is Tyler Lorenz, I'm the Program Director for Residents Recovery Society. I'm looking for a capital funding grant this year, as opposed to operating grant. We learned our lesson last year, and we're actually happy to say that the Saskatchewan government has finally come up with a RFP for sober living. So that'll be in this month, and we'll be funding in December. So we're really excited about that funding, get things going in the right direction. So we're looking for a capital project grant with widespread benefits to the community, from individuals to families, residents to first responders. The completion of the existing space that we have in our back for utilization by both the Recovery Center and the community, support groups, demonstrating the city's commitment to support those struggling with mental health and addiction issues, and those marginalized as a result of these issues. Our capital project proposes the completion of a programming space for under $20,000. Once complete, the community will have access to a large boardroom with a capacity of 40 individuals. In the additional boardroom, this meeting room will have access to washrooms, a kitchen, and a socialization area. Given the connection is an important aspect to recovery, this welcoming space will allow people the opportunity to reconnect with healthy supports at one centralized location. Downtown space will become the hub of recovery within our community. The upcoming closure of the community resource building, multiple peer support groups will be seeking space to hold their meetings. Currently, this building hosts 2 meetings almost every day of the week. This is a lot of support groups that will be seeking alternative locations to hold the meetings. Rather than having these meetings spread throughout the city, often making them difficult to access, this capital project will maintain the consistency of meeting space that addicts and alcoholics have come to expect. It's important to keep meetings. It is important that we keep meetings centrally located to ensure access to the marginalized population. These individuals being the most physically affected by addiction. Ensuring that our recovery community remains strong will only enhance our community's health and result in a better environment for all. This renovation completion will benefit individuals participating in the Residents Recovery Program as well. To date, there have been over 170 individuals that have walked through our doors seeking support. Daily programming currently supports up to 25 people per day. Currently, space is being utilized. The space being utilized as our completed boardroom at that, we've outgrown that. So a decision was made to move to the unfinished space in the back, just because we had to do it out of necessity. As the program has just completed its first year of operation, the expectation is that the program will grow and have the ability to provide immediate support to anyone seeking recovery. The program has seen growth in every month since its inception last September. This is not expected to drop off at any time soon given the high demand for our services. We currently have just under 40 individuals on our waiting list for solo living. Once funding becomes available to sustain more housing and staff, we'll have enough individuals on our waiting list to more than double our capacity immediately. That 26 was quite old actually. We get about five or six applications a week from Edmonton Remand, plus about 5 or 6 a week from the community here as well. So the reach in the community for this capital project would be thousands. Direct impact would be a couple hundred that partake in our Residents Recovery Program or in peer support groups. Beyond that, it's hard to quantify how many families, extended families and loved ones that have these individuals' healthy effects. Getting and keeping struggling individuals in recovery really impacts us all. Moving individuals from active addiction into recovery reduces crime, reduces emergency room waits, and reduces strain on our other community organizations. It has been well documented by first responders, emergency room staff, police, government agencies, and support organizations that 80% or more of their time is spent on 20% or less of these individuals. Supporting these high maintenance individuals really does impact many. Thank you for your time considering our proposal, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Glenn. Councillor Torson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to make sure that I'm clear, so there was renovations that were done in 2018 and that fixed up a bunch of stuff. And
yeah.
This is a grant to fix up the remainder.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
My concern was when I first read it that it was asking for money for something that was already done 3/4 of the way through, but you're talking about a different space that isn't done yet.
3/4 of our entire building is done. There is still requires some completions in the back.
And I'm on the same page as you now. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't playing catch up for something that already happened. But thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for your presentation. Do you guys don't own the building that you're in?
No, we lease
it's
the
a
building,
lease.
5-year lease.
So with projections of continued growth, are you going to outgrow that immediately, even if you do the reno?
No, we have quite a bit of space there. I mean, we're going to be capped with what we can handle for individuals. I mean, right now we have that set at 40. Having more than 40 individuals in a programming group is just not going to be effective. So, yeah.
The other question I had around it would be, you referenced specifically Edmonton Remand.
Yeah. Those are Lloydminster residents.
Okay.
A lot of them are Lloydminster residents that are caught in that cycle of addiction and crime. We take only, to date we've only taken only Lloydminster residents. We do receive applications from all over Western Canada really, but we have only, because it's only been community supported, we've only taken residents from Lloydminster into the houses.
No, I think it's good to state that publicly, because for those of us that don't know, those listening online and in the room, why is the city supporting those guys? They're coming out of Edmonton Remand. That's not the case necessarily. There are people that happen to be there.
They are Lloydminster residents.
From here.
We also have taken individuals from PA that are Lloydminster residents, Pine Grove in PA for women that are Lloydminster residents, Saskatoon Correctional as well.
Good, thank you.
Councilor Baker.
Thank you. Tyler, what kind of that building's owned by somebody else?
Darren Weinhoff,
What kind of a lease you're incorporated?
We are, yes.
And what kind of lease agreement,
We have a
long-term lease agreement do you have for that building?
We have a 5-year lease with them.
And I want to know, are you sure you can sustain it all? Because that's downtown, private property, and if your lease is day to day or month to month, like, the owner could come on tomorrow and tell you, we sold the building, and that's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Darren has been, I think we're paying probably less than 50% for what the average rate would be for that space downtown.
That's what I'm worried about. I'm
Good.
pretty good what's gonna happen.
Good for.
You're not to answer that.
Oh, like at the end of the 5 years?
Oh, I don't know.
No, we have a 5-year lease with it. Yeah, so, I mean.
Because with leasehold improvements, the day you leave, the day they're gone.
Mhm.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. No, he's been very supportive of our program. We have that long 5-year lease signed with him at
I want to
a
see you get hooked to
at a very good
bucks you
rate.
downstairs and you're gone.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Councilor Fang.
Tyler, did you mention that did you get some operational funding recently?
We haven't yet.
Okay.
But this RFP from the Saskatchewan Health Authority, we've been working really hard with Dr. Benjamin on that for some time. We're actually providing applications for both here and North Battleford. We had a proposal going in North Battleford through Community Living, which the Saskatchewan Finance Minister just struck down here a couple weeks ago. So with this RFP coming out, we've decided to utilize all the work that we did in North Battleford and submit an RFP as well for North Battleford, just so we don't lose all that work that we put in.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Tyler, for your presentation. Thank you for your hard work. Moving on to agenda item number 5, administrative reports. I'll look to the city manager for 5.1.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. To present 5.1 entrance signage capital project update, I'll turn over to Dan Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to provide a quick clarity on what entrance signage are for the city of Lloydminster, we are referring to the brown welcome to the Border City signs that are on Highway 17 located on our east and west side. Our west side location just being outside of Canadian Brew House. These signs were approved by council in 1990, and as council and the community here is aware, our border for the city limits has since that time changed and grown quite a bit. And the signs, again, are also in the 1990s, so they're quite dated today. So in early August, administration issued an RFP for the design and installation of 2 and 4 new signs for the community. So we're looking at the pricing on both getting just 2 done as well as 4. The RFP has since closed on the 23rd of August, and we received 6 submissions. We are in the process of just reviewing some of those submissions with some of the vendors that submitted. The main issue being that we have requested these signs be solar powered, and some of the ones didn't necessarily speak to that in the submission, so we're just making sure that everything in there is all inclusive and that we are looking at apples to apples basically on the signs being solar powered. As far as the process to go moving forward, the administration will be bringing forward to the next council meeting the results of the RFP scoring, and then administration, pending council's approval, would like to see an awarded vendor, and the administration would work with them to finalize the sign design, and that will come back to council as well. At this point, the RFPs, we asked the vendors to submit designs for the signs based on being complementary to the existing sign that is by the Synergy Credit Union. So these are just concepts at this point in time that we've had, and we based some scoring on those results. As well as the final location for these signs are something that administration will look to finalize as well through council, the committee, and our regional group. Happy to answer any questions that are at this point in time.
Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Your Worship. Is that one sign?
Sorry, we've requested pricing for 2 and 4 signs.
Did I miss that? I thought I read that twice. 4 new entrance signs?
Yeah, up to 4. We currently have 2. We have located on the east and west side of Highway 16.
And you're thinking some of them have worn out, is that what it is? They looked at too much or what?
As well, they would need to be relocated as well for a welcome sign. They're quite at least inside.
So I just wondered about the one on the east side, the north side, if they were that important right now with things being a little tougher. And we haven't expanded that way, I don't think. East and north. I understand west and south. Just a question.
I guess that's something to be discussed at council.
Just have to get it on the table before what happens.
I was just going to add, Your Worship, again, the proposed annexation area that actually pushed the boundary north from where it currently is, and also west from where it currently is.
And south.
And south. So
And south,
the question mark would be around, the capacity of the sign to be moved, or our ability to have those signs put in place in advance of the MGB reviewing annexation and all those other pieces, because we're thinking, I think a year, 18 months potentially, and I think the signs probably would be something that would happen in a far shorter timeline than that, so.
And that's something we're absolutely aware of, and that's part of why we don't have a final location selected. Most of the signs will just be concrete based on screw valves into the ground, so the location shouldn't matter. And in our research, and you can see within our own borders that most communities welcome signage is actually outside of their community boundaries, so you know where you're coming up to it. I guess Arnold Wilton being a good example where that would be inside city, but it's driving into theirs as well. So as stated, it's something administration will work with council as well as our regional neighbors here to finalize.
Councilor
Thank you, Your Worship. If you were doing 2 signs, which locations are those going to?
If we were just to do the 2, we'd be looking at replacing the 2 that are currently on Highway 16.
East,
so east-west.
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions for Dan?
Your Worship, would we be auctioning off the other ones as memorabilia of some value to someone and as a potential offset to the cost, or what are we going to do with the old ones?
My understanding is that they are concrete form and that they got some weight behind them, so
no one would want to steal them.
You might make a heck of a patio.
It's definitely something we can review.
Yeah, I just see a lot of people stop and have a picture taken. They run out, and whether it's out of the brew house or wherever they're in the parking lot, they're pulled over and they're getting selfies and pictures taken on that marker. So, anyways, it's a popular marker for sure.
And there could be a deal on some City of Champions signs or something around this.
Could be. Any other questions? Thank you very much, Dan. You can look forward to that report coming forward. Back to City Manager for 5.2.
Thank you, Worship. To discuss 5.2, safety codes, inspection services, building and plumbing disciplines, I'll ask Terry Burke to come forward.
Good afternoon, Terry.
Afternoon, Council and Mayor. So in front of you is a information report on safety codes inspection services for building and plumbing disciplines. Currently, the City of Leominster is operating on a month-to-month basis for these types of services within the city. And we determined that we want to go down and award a potential contract with a company to provide services for 12 months. Securing the services of safety code inspection, building and plumbing disciplines, a vendor will provide the City of Leominster with those seeking permits and consistent permit issuance and inspection services. It should be noted that during this time, this year period that we call it, administration will be reviewing internal and external practices surrounding building permit issuances and inspection services with intention of identifying efficiencies and increasing the levels of customer service. So this is doing a little bit of research with our neighboring municipalities, see what they do, how they have elevated the inspection side of things within their communities, and taking that time to apply that and issue a future RFP in the coming year, and doing more of a long-term contract, probably a 3-year term type scenarios. Obviously, the biggest thing in this initial year time, we've adopted the new National Building Code and National Energy Code, so this company coming forward will provide that education purposes for our building contractors as well as for us as a municipality too. So I'll open that up for, I guess, questions from you.
Any questions for Derek? Councilor Baker.
Thank you. Let's watch the city go through our inspectors, contract inspectors, our inspectors, and then contractor inspectors. And I'm not 100% sure what is right, but for some reason, and I guess maybe it's a lot of years of seeing what's going on, I'm not sure we don't need an employee of the city that's highly qualified that could be here on an interim basis to look after this whole building inspection. You can go back to the minutes of the meeting in early 2000, and we talked about the same problem. And some of the contractors, they got so busy that they got towns all over the place that they're doing inspections for. And I don't know if you get any better service or not. And I don't know what kind of contract you could hold them right in the city. But if they're only getting paid, if they are, and I'm only assuming, for the inspections they do, they're going to want to do all the inspections they can. And they could be in Marsden or they could be in Vegreville, because that happened in the past. And I just wonder if we can get the right kind of person. And we're not making decisions today, but I'm just saying, there's something about having your own man in the tank there looking after the shop. And I'll just leave it at that for now.
I'd like to Executive Manager Stain.
Thank you, Mayor. In the 2018 budget, we had allocated funding to bring these services in-house. We were not successful in finding qualified staff to come in and take those services on, which is why we're in a month-to-month with our current provider. So we want to go through this process and establish a 1-year time frame for us to establish what our priorities are, what our requirements are, what are the needs of the city, so we can go out to tender again to enter into a longer term agreement. There's other factors that have to be taken into consideration when you bring those in-house, including liability and those types of things. So when we looked at bringing it in-house, there was a really good business plan tied to that. If you can get the right people and keep the right people. We didn't have any success in that. We put it out for bid, I think, several times without receiving any qualified members to move to this community.
Can I ask when we ask for qualified personnel to later how long ago was that done?
Sorry, I didn't get the question.
That was last year.
Yeah, in 2018. I don't know the exact month that would have went out, but it was in our 2018 budget. We attempted to hire in 2018.
And I believe it was posted two for sure, if not
2 times, I think 3 times.
3 times looking, and that was on the website, and we just we didn't find the qualified person interested.
When we originally went down this avenue, of course, of contracting the services, that was the same challenge we experienced back then. I can't remember what year was that. It's been a while that we've had contracted services in here, but we definitely struggled with keeping qualified people on staff doing it in-house, and as such, that's why the decision was made to go this way. And I guess we obviously had the same struggle here just a year ago too. So.
Councilor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I just think that in terms of the strategy, and I'm not sure what the whole business plan would look like in the first place with having someone on staff, but, you know, the amount of downtime that could exist in a kind of building environment with the number of permits going through right now, I think that this is the right approach. You know, do you have to potentially revisit it or put something within the contract where in a scenario where, you know, we're in a boom period again and you need that consistent, you know, person who's available to solely the city of Lloydminster and not to all the surrounding communities, you know, then you can reconsider it at that point. But that's one thing that I would think about within this contract is the severability or termination type clauses in a scenario where that happens. But as far as the strategy of doing that right now, I think it makes sense with where we're at right now. Thank you.
Councilor Payne.
So is this going to be sole sourced, or are you going to be tendering it out as far as the supply company goes?
Yeah, we've issued an RFP already last month or the month before, and went through a pretty extensive review of actually 2 proponents that brought forward. So we'll be moving that forward into council's hands for approval here very shortly on results and recommendations from there.
Any other questions or comments for Terry? Thank you, Terry. I don't think you need to go too far. Moving on to governance and priorities standards, 6.1, elect the city manager.
I'm up for the next 2 again.
Okay.
Keep in mind, I'm not a planner here, so I may fall for a couple things here. In front of you is more of an information item on Eastwood Trailer Park, MVP and Elk Land Use bylaw amendments. So to update the committee with information pertaining to an application submitted to subdivide and amend the MVP and land use within Eastwood Trailer Park. I won't go through the actual location, but it's 250, range 28, west of the 3rd. So back in June, Planning Development received an application to amend the lands described below within the municipal development plan and the land use bylaw. In order to facilitate the subdivision, 2 amendments need to be made. For the municipal development plan, moving it from residential to parks, trails, and open space and institutional. And on the land use side of it is moving it from R4 medium density residential to residential manufacturing home district and urban park district. The purpose of the amendments are to facilitate the subdivision and sale of a portion of parcel B to the city in order to expand the parking lot of the VLA lands, soccer pitches. In doing so, administration finds it prudent to include all the lands occupied by the Eastwood Trailer Park in the land use amendment to bring them into compliance, obviously, with that bylaw. The city is working jointly with the Ministry of Environment of Saskatchewan in regards to these applications due to their proximity to the soccer pitches, which are formerly used as a municipal landfill. No final decisions pertaining to these applications can be made until the historical landfill closure study has been completed and accepted by, as information by council. On June 24th, administration initiated a referral period and circulated referrals to adjacent landowners, external agencies, and internal departments. It ended on July 15th, and responses were received from external agencies and internal departments. Currently, administration is working through the responses received, and no decision will be rendered until it is satisfied with all the information that we received. Obviously, the objective is, of course, accordingly, with the land sale. I will pass it to council for questions.
Thank you, Terry. So I guess you answered my first question. Why we're doing this is because we're not complying with our own bylaw, land use bylaw, so this is important. This gets done.
As soon as subdivision is triggered, land use, in this specific case, the land use is probably more important one. And the area in red, as you can see on the map there, was obviously zoned or land use established as R4, where in fact it is actually a residential manufactured home district. So there was a slight miss, I guess, in the last land use update, and so automatically need to correct that as part of it too. Yeah.
So this would come forward as 2 potential bylaws, correct?
They'll have to be passed concurrently when we do move forward with them. But again, it's pending the landfill closure study prior to that going forward.
Any questions? Not seeing any. Thank you, Terry.
Okay.
And we'll move on to 6.2.
Moving right along, you betcha. So this one is to provide the committee with information pertaining to an application submitted to close a portion of the lane identified on the plan proposed for the closure. So JRR Automotive, which is a numbered company, has applied to close a portion of the road described. The proposal of closure will be subject to a consolidation with the adjacent lands. Consolidation will be conditioned on the purchase and sales agreement between the city of Leominster and the purchaser. Prior to the consolidation, land subject to the road closure must have the appropriate land use designations applied. So similar to the last report that I provided you, obviously establishing MDP, a commercial aspect of things, and the land use of C5. We've sent out referrals just recently on the road closure and amendments in the land use bylaw. Yeah, just more of an information item on things to come forward with a potential sale, and obviously a road closure first and then a potential sale. The applicant is looking to obviously expand, and as such, this remnant lane, we've done a little bit of research on it, can't figure out why or why it's, obviously why it's there, but has no use that we can see as per from our aspect of things.
So you can actually see the lane on the aerial photo there. Correct?
Just barely on there, yeah.
Yes, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But it is, okay. So basically, again, it would come forward as proposed bylaws.
Yep.
Process and go from there if that's.
Yeah, everything will come forward and need to be approved concurrently in order, and obviously with the road closure and obviously the sale side of things too.
So Terry, again, it'll be the C5, all the surrounding land is C5, but it's just that because of that.
It's just establishing the land use and the MVP principles within now a parcel of land.
Love learning about planning. So interesting. Any questions for Terry on this proposal? I think, we look forward to it, have a council, and start the process.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Terry. On to the city manager for 6.3.
Thank you, Worship, to present 6.3, draft reserves policy. I'll ask the CFO, Denise McDonald, to present.
Good afternoon, Council, Mayor.
Good afternoon.
Finally, we have the draft reserves policy for your view and input and guidance. In light of the timing, I think I'll just go right into the policy itself and then give you an opportunity to make changes or ask questions after the fact. So the purpose of this policy is to provide a safeguard and to assist in long-term financial stability and financial planning, and to outline the goals and objectives related to the city's reserves. It's to ensure the financial resources are available to maintain a viable and sustainable community. So the reserves shall be established and expanded to ensure stable, predictable tax levies, provide operational emergencies, and finance new capital activities, as well as safeguard and maximize existing assets. So there's a number of definitions there. The one that is important is what we've decided to do in the definitions was identify some background material as to what some of the reserves are for. And you'll see later on in the policy that we have one sheet for every reserve. That was for administrative purposes, and it won't go forward with the policy, but I felt that it was important because this is a new policy that you would want to see it now, and any future reserves that were added into the system will come to council, and you will see that sheet every time we add a new one. So the ones that are in the definitions are there because that will be in the policy and goes forward. So the first one is the city manager contingency reserve. So that establishes an amount that the city manager can utilize as emergent or unexpected or urgent items. The reserve will have a beginning balance annually, and the city manager could draw on it in accordance with purchasing threshold and would be replenished at the end of every year. The Innovation Reserve was established as an incentive to encourage creativity and innovation. Allocations from this reserve may be made to fund departments or work groups that would like to explore innovative or creative solutions directed towards making the city more efficient and or effective. Business cases would be presented to the city manager and the executive leadership team requesting the use of these funds, and they would be required to identify replenishing methods to replenish that reserve. These would include future departmental costs or service level adjustments or additional revenue generation necessary to top up the accounts over, say, a 3-year period. Equipment and infrastructure reserves would be established to create a funding source for building and infrastructure capital projects, new equipment purchases, capital equipment replacement programs. Employee benefit obligations reserve. So this would be a reserve established when the city is incurring a retirement benefit liability or other employee-related liability, which the city is obligated to pay at some future date. Currently, the city has a sick leave benefit plan that, based on accumulation, if the plan is not utilized during their term of employment, an employee is entitled to a cash payout upon retirement based on half of the accumulated credit, subject to 55 years of age and 10 years of employment. This reserve would be established and adjusted annually at year-end. Landfill closure and post-closure liability reserve. So a reserve would be established to fund the closure of the landfill sites and provide post-closure care of the facility. Again, that would be adjusted every year at year-end. Off-site levies. This reserve is required by the off-site levies bylaw as amended from time to time to account for proceeds from development cost charges levied against new developments. The reserve is funded from the proceeds of the development costs levied. Use of the funds is determined by the off-site levy bylaw and is restricted to funding approved projects as allowed in that bylaw. Sale of city land and building reserves would be established to account for proceeds from any sale of city land and buildings. Sustainability and resiliency reserve established to offset for extraordinary and unforeseen expenditure requirements, one-time expenditures, revenue shortfalls to minimize fluctuations in the general tax levy, and to manage cash flows. The targeted balance for that stabilization reserve is to be a maximum of 10% of the annual municipal tax levy for its own purposes. So the guiding principles of the reserve policy is by maintaining reserves, the city can accumulate funds for future or contingent liabilities, a key component to a sound long-term financial planning practice. Reserves are at the discretion of council, often as part of an overall strategy for funding programs or projects. Reserves are segregated and restricted for specific purposes. In a municipality, a distinction is further made between obligatory and discretionary reserves. So the obligatory reserves are created where provincial legislation requires revenue received for special purposes to be segregated from the general revenue of the municipality. Restricted reserve funds are obligatory and can only be used for their prescribed purposes. Examples are off-site levies, municipal reserve funds, school funds, the landfill reclamation, utility reserves that are not funded by taxation, etc. Unrestricted reserves are discretionary in nature and are established based on council's direction to finance future expenditures for which the city has authority to spend money or to provide for a specific purpose. Several discretionary reserve funds have been established to assist in long-term programs. The best examples of these are vehicle and equipment replacement reserve. Reserves are not associated with any specific asset. Reserves are generally used as a funding source to mitigate the impact of fluctuations in operating costs and revenue reductions over multiple budget cycles. reserves help to eliminate very highs and lows of the taxation rate and result in a more horizontal tax rate with an incline for inflation. Oh, I'm
Sorry, I don't mean to be rude when I say this, but you don't have to read the whole policy to us.
Okay.
Or are there just specific parts that you wanted to read? I don't know if I speak for the whole group, but I do have some questions on some specific areas, but otherwise I've read everything. Not to be rude.
Okay, I'll change my game plan then.
Okay.
Reserves do not earn interest unless they're obligatory. And then I included for a target for the capital reserves, 2 to 3%. And I've included an example in there on purpose in order to identify that typically we would put 2 to 3% away. And if I was to look at the gross for 2018, you can see that we're not even close to that. So there would be substantial increase, and so I would suggest we have to phase that in over time. Then there's general criteria, and we've also included policy administration, and I don't think that it's typical to include that in the policies, and I had quite a discussion with Ledge Services because they didn't want to include that, but I felt that it was really important to include it to ensure that somebody's responsible to watch, to make sure that we're reporting back to council with some checks and balances to make sure that the reserves are there, they haven't gone over their maximum, they're not in a negative position, and there's some reporting mechanism required and proper approvals for them. So I have included that there. So then I just have a note then on 7.1.9 where it's required that to present the annual year-end surplus to council. I just wanted to reiterate that it is always council's decision. Admin will propose what goes into reserve, but it will be council's decision where it goes. So if there's objection or if council wants to put it in a different reserve or propose a different place to put the money, that's council's decision. We can only propose. I also felt on 7.1.11 or 11, I put in a formula there, and that was also not a typical format for a policy. However, I felt that it was important to build a formula in there that, say, in the future, something happens to me or Odell or current staff members, that information is carried on for the future so that it is reported to council that those reserves are funded.
So I'll provide you with a handful of comments. Part of this is that I'm giddy because I'm very excited for this. Maybe I'll save it for when someone listening within the world, but at the same time, in terms of our strategic goal, this is one of them. This is like a big check mark off of the list, and I think it's an incredibly important one. I think it's one of the main reasons people elected someone with my background to begin with. One of the things you mentioned right at the end in terms of the total reserve balance is the formula. Makes perfect sense to actually include it in there to me because a reserve is only as good as whether or not it's funded. So you can't have unfunded reserves. We saw what happened with the city of Lloydminster in 2015 or 2016, whatever year it was, when there was a $27 million write-off of reserves that existed but had no funds to back them. We don't want to get in that scenario again, so this policy actually helps deal with a problem that's existed in the past. So it's a good thing to include in there. As well as I would say that this policy administration and what you have in there as far as it being council's call at the end of the day, because we can say right now with the priority of this council what the split is between the different reserves and things like that, but the priorities and the information may change over time, or what you believe the future looks like after a year end's done and you want to allocate those reserves may change significantly from year to year, and you want to have that flexibility to be able to make the decisions, although it's good to have some basic understanding in terms of formula for how to allocate things. The one question I had as far because the real question is 5.7. So what we're saying is this is the all asset values. We would take a percentage, so of the total like gross book value. So you're saying if I took all the assets in the city and took away, you know, depreciation to date on those, we want a percentage of that book value taken every year. And it just, maybe it's hot, like too high of a percentage. I don't know what's considered reasonable in other places, but it just looks like a big number in terms of a way to get there. Won't come without, you know, increases down the road. But I also understand that this will smooth things out over the long run. So if you can get up to that point, you're going to have smooth budgeting. All of a sudden, 3-year operational budgets or 5-year operational budgets, whatever you want to do, like 10-year capital plans, become more realistic and easy to do from year to year when you know you have a certain amount of rigidity in terms of what you're doing from a reserve policy and a certain amount of flexibility from what you can do year to year, so that, you know, one major event doesn't throw off the entire plan. So, I don't know, it's great. You did a fantastic job. Your team did, rather.
Certainly, there was a great deal of research done on other people's policies, and that's where the 2 to 3% came from. However, when you look at what we're currently putting away in comparison to what they're suggesting, that the tax rate would have to go so high in order to support that, that we would not be able to do that in the near future. We'll have to build that.
And fair enough.
Just some other notes I had in there. So the one reserve, the bid reserve, of course, that's specific to the downtown bid that we established or closed down that goes down December 31st. That money was placed into reserve and would have a specific purpose. So that's an obligatory reserve. The city manager's contingency reserve. So we put on every one of these reserves, we put a description of the name of the reserve, who would be, what departments would support the reserve, what the purpose of the reserve was, the source funding for the reserve, optimal balance for the reserve, and of course the application. So on this particular one, I had a note that for the city manager's contingency reserve, that it would be for timely items and it would not need a motion of council because we would need to do it quickly or emergent. And with the maximum threshold, that would allow for 2 to 5 events in a year, 2.5 events a year. The unrestricted current year capital reserve revenue, so that one is just a flow-through account when we plan the capital reserves, capital projects for the year, and we're pulling money from reserves, and it's been taxed through operations. It's just a flow through to capital so that we can do those funds. So we are currently already using a reserve like that.
Denise, if I can stop you for a second, Councilor Batchel.
Yeah, it's you can continue and I can bring a question of that. That's fine.
Okay. Employee obligation operation reserve. And this, what this does is ensure that the funds are set aside from, the funds are set aside other than hitting, so when we go to pay this out, when someone actually has to utilize this reserve, currently if we don't have it funded, it'll hit operations and it will be unexpected. So if we're setting it up every year and we're monitoring what the value of that is, it gets expensed as it's accumulating, not when it's required. And so that's easier to absorb.
The matching principle in accounting.
Councilor Baker, Denise, if I can stop you.
Your worship, that was really good reading, Denise. Really well done. I've been looking for this for a long time, I'll tell you, because the way it was, you've seen it. It really was, I couldn't even, and I'm not even an accountant. I'm just an ordinary guy in the street. I can follow this, I understand it. I just got a couple of questions. And you brought one up was the funded reserves. You know how things went there. So if we have a reserve for something, and there's $100,000 in it, and we take out $10,000. Why isn't an automatic book entry made so that reserve only shows $90,000 left? Like, that's simple accounting to me. Like, once you decide you're taking money out of reserve or something, then you make that entry every month or daily or weekly, I don't know. I'm sure you guys can figure that out. But that, what the rest of us do, if we take $100 in our pocket and we spend $50, you better look and see if you get $50 left. And that's the way it kind of works. And whether you adjust that monthly or do it as you make an entry and do a journal entry at the time or whatever you do nowadays in accounting. We used to call them journal entries when you did that. The other thing is, the one thing I ask about, because I still have this thing about how city managers and senior staff sometimes were, you might say, I hate the word accused, but doing things they shouldn't do, which wasn't always true. And so when you take funds out of say you have $100,000 left in a project, and you use that word quite often there, and it's as good as any, not required for anything else in a project, and you want to transfer that $100,000 to a account, then I believe that should come through council, when you do that once a month. Is that going to happen?
Yes, certainly, and that's a good segue for my next note, is that...
Well, I missed something then, because...
Yeah, annually, we will propose like surpluses and deficits at year end. We'll come to council, we'll go through the report with you and identify where we think the money should go, and then council will have the opportunity to change our line of thought. But what I did want to note is that an operating reserve will help eliminate the use it or lose it kind of thinking for managers, because if you don't have a reserve policy, what ends up happening is you get to November, if they haven't spent their money, they're going to lose it. So this allows us to put the funds into an operating reserve up to a certain amount, and then the rest would be forwarded to capital. So that's covered by the policy.
I thought it was really well done, and that's exactly why you have these policies. So you aren't grabbing money out of somewhere else where you shouldn't be, unless it's authorized, because, you know, the rest speaks for itself. But thank you, well done, I thought.
Councilor Torres.
Sorry, Councilor Diachuk. I just wanted to comment on that last point. It's something that's been talked about in the past, is the way that we're planning to do the 10% leftover, otherwise going into a general pool. I think that helps to promote the right kind of behavior as far as budgeting goes. There's no padding going on, because it does not incentivize padding, and hopefully just incentivizes the right kind of behavior as far as how to use city funds, as well as there's other things within this as far as doing new and innovative things that I think is a great idea, finding ways to save money, be more efficient, and different parts like that. And one other question I had is whether or not there's parts of this that need the completion of the utility model to be done to really, I think, bring this all home. Because the utility model, in terms of how it accumulates reserves, may be different than the rest of it to me. Because there may be a level of reserve you can build into where you come up with a rate for the utility model. Because generally you have operating expenses, capital expenses, and then potentially replacement value included in building a rate. So I'm wondering if it's maybe slightly different than how we do the rest of these, but unless you think this takes care of it.
Well, what I was thinking was that the self-supported departments will definitely have they cannot be moved to, say, a tax supported. So anytime it's a self-supported reserve, it's not tax supported, so therefore it can't go to those particular reserves. So it will kind of not allow council to move money from one area to another depending on the funding source. So it will restrict council in some way, However, we are hoping to try for the 2020 budget, to net out the self-supporting departments to zero. So their revenue comes in, the money flows through to their reserve or their capital projects. You know, it might be some transition, but we're trying to make that budget look so that the self-supporting departments are self-supported. Now, crossing our fingers it all works. We're hopeful that it's going to work well.
Yeah, a lot of that will depend on the impact the utility model has on the current rates. And so if we can make it work along with how the capital is impacted, then that's our goal. We think it might be close, but until we get the final calculation done, we won't know the final answer to that.
Okay.
Good. Councilor Ledger.
Yeah, it's more of a structural thing, but just on 7.1.11, I guess as I look at those two sort of formulas, I would give each of them like an I and then two I's, like a 1, 2, so that they're split out as individual standalone pieces because they are standalone. And the second part would be is I would actually put that cash plus short-term investment plus long-term investment are greater than or equal to. Because I think what you're trying to imply in there should never be less than, but it could be equal to. And similar with the second one, short-term investment shall be greater than or equal to total reserve allocated for current capital year projects. So what we're trying to say is, and you always put it in a positive, but it could be equal to the amount you want to spend. That's all, just sort of mathematically, I would use that symbol in there, and I'd give one the I and the other one 2 I's, so that's they're given prominence in that sense as standalone kind of pieces.
Okay.
Does that work, John?
Sure.
Okay.
So then I just wanted to, I don't think I had any more notes on any individual ones. If there aren't any questions, I would like to go to this Excel spreadsheet. So what will happen is if you're in agreement with this reserve policy with some changes, we would take it forward to council the next meeting and look for a resolution, a recommendation to approve it, as well as removing any old policies that reflect direction to put money into reserve. So we'll have to remove some old policies, put forward the new policy, and then as a second request for decision, we would look at reallocating our reserves. So just to kind of walk you through this quickly, the green items are, the green ones on top here are the restricted reserves. And we have these two yellow ones that were actually in unrestricted reserve area and they should be in restricted. So we will move those over. And that leaves us with about 18 million to allocate. And so when you look at, the purpose of this worksheet is to show you the operating reserves on the left and the capital reserves on the right. And what I'm proposing is to take that 18 million and allocate it to these proposed allocations. So you'll see that I'm proposing for operating of 2.9 million and for capital I'm proposing 15.2 million. Those two add up to the 18 million. And then in the green, I've shown what we've got. I notice I don't have all the allocation to reserves for the 19 budget, but most of them are there so that you have kind of an idea of what we're anticipating by the end of 19. And with that, I'd like to say that because this is such a new policy for the city and it's quite comprehensive, I feel like we probably will need to make some tweaks to it at the end of the year in December, and then look at it again in a year's time to make sure it's reflecting what council's desire is for this policy.
Any other questions, comments?
I'm not, Your Worship, thank you. I'm not as giddy perhaps as my partner is across, but I'm very happy to see that. Because I think we've talked about, capital challenges and other pieces that are out there. This now will dovetail in with all the other pieces that we want to do and be able to give us kind of the framework and tools to be able to do it. Without this policy, it's going to be pretty tough to do all those other things. So we need this and it needs to be in place. So I'm happy about that.
Yep.
And so I think you'll see that once this policy is passed, if there's any shortfalls for projects, then part of those motions will have to indicate where the money is going to come from, and then we can identify reserve number, general governance operating reserve, and it has this amount of money in that reserve, and that's where the money will come from. So like it'll be clear for the motions if there's any shortfalls, if there's any overages, so then council can approve those and know where the money's coming from, and it doesn't feel like, or why do we have surplus funds?
That's true.
Thank you, your deputy worship. Just something I wanted to read because I think it's really important, and this is for our strategic plan. Establish a strong fiscal policy relating to reserves. Through establishment of long-term financial strategy, the City of Lloydminster will create fiscal policy relating to reserves, thereby ensuring the city can plan future capital and operating investments with financial surety. It is 1 of 8, and to me, big deal. I'm very excited.
Plus the giddiness.
Did you want to share that giddiness at a particular establishment?
Thank you for that, Councillor Torres. I think it's always nice to reflect back on the strategic priorities that we've put in place, and that's kind of a nice reflection of what we're working towards. So, Councillor Baker.
Your Worship, thank you. Just near the end of your presentation, you mentioned it stops council from transferring funds from one account to another. I have a little concern about that from this perspective. What if we have an emergency? We have a major flood. We have a major fire, and we needed a lot of money quick. In there, I prefer we'd like to see a clause where how you describe the reason to take money out of some of the reserves. I'm not quite sure of the wording because it just popped in when you mentioned it. But there should be some way we can, within our own policy, if we deem it an emergency, community emergency, national emergency, I don't know what you want to call it, that we can transfer funds out at the discretion of council, if need be, of an emergency. I'm not talking or of all of a sudden something, community building fell down and there was need for big money instantly. Would we have the right to do that the way I heard that? No.
Well, all the reserves are council's funds, with the exception of the obligatory reserves that have regulations saying how you can spend them. The other ones are all council's reserves. All I was saying was self-supported departments are different than tax-supported departments. And so we need to caution council and to take a good thought process of you're taking your self-supported money that you've charged user fees on to a certain group of the population. It's not great to take user fee money and put it towards tax-supported projects, as well as it's not good to take tax-supported money and put it to user fee departments. So yes, it's council's decision as a whole, but we would always caution you before you chose to take money from one funding source and put it to another. There would be already reserves established for emergency purposes like resiliency, the city manager's account. There would be funds set aside for those specific items that were emergent in nature.
But if we had a $2 million disaster tomorrow, how much is in the fund? Not enough. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so what we're proposing to have in the fund for resiliency
I think it's $500,000 for the city manager.
The city manager is up to $500,000, and we are proposing $3.6 million to be set aside over time for the resiliency fund.
But from now to then,
right now, we would have, by the end of December, we should have $1.5 million in that fund.
I just don't want it to get caught that you can't do that in case of emergency. How you do that, I don't know. That'll be up for legal people to figure that out. But I think you should look at that. That's the only, but it would have to be fairly tight, the reason to do it. But it's happened to businesses before.
certainly there might be some room to decide how much reserves the city wants to hold, and what is required to be held by the city to ensure that you're not in a shortfall situation. But it's going to take us some time to get there to fund the reserves, so.
If we had a disaster today, money would have to come from somewhere. That's all I'm saying. So if we have all these reserves and nothing's free or available other than, what, $500,000 or whatever you said?
Yeah, I would probably suggest we'll check the wording of our emergency bylaw just to make sure that it syncs with this to ensure the wording, because I think there is something in there that gives me the authority to act on a as-needed basis, in the sense of emergency. So we'll make sure the wording, there's some wording that reflects that.
Do we have anything like that?
Well, we have the bylaw, around emergency bylaw, that, it's not reflected. Well, the wording probably isn't there, but we'll make sure the wording, there's some wording that synergizes both.
So, just a couple things. One, in section 2, it says 2.1.2, provide for operating emergencies. So we stated in the policy those reserves are for that purpose. The only thing that you might want to consider is, what's an emergency? And as in a definition and a set of vocabulary you have at the beginning. And I think the rest is probably fine. Time to time, the city may be required to draw upon reserves from other categories in order to address emergencies that may occur either from, whatever it is, kind of thing. And that gives you capacity to do that.
Just one question from my side here. The 5 policies that are denoted as would be changed by this. Are those 5 policies automatically repealed with the adoption of this, or do we have to have a repealing of those 5 policies individually?
I think we were planning to put it right in there to repeal them in the recommendation in the RFD. I think we've already written the RFD in draft, and it would be part of the RFD and a motion, as a truth motion.
So 5 separate motions on that, maybe, or?
Traditionally, we've done it right in the policy, so similar to how we would repeal bylaws. So then it's there to repeal. Sorry.
Yeah, pretty much. With this one, there will be one motion approving the new policy and then one motion repealing.
I'm fairly sure we're certain there's no hidden ones that are going to be affected by this. We've got all 5 that need to go.
We believe so, yes.
Anything else? Well, Denise, thanks to you and your team for this. This is a huge amount of work and a lot of background put into this, so it doesn't go unnoticed by us, and we thank you for all that. Thank you. Please pass that on to your team as well. With that, we'll move to inquiries from the media. Unless there's anything else.
Hey!
Thank you, Your Deputy Worship. Today we have no request from the media.
Excellent.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Councilor Datchuk, second.